Yeah, the closest I ever came was Pedro Martinez's fault. He threw down Don Zimmer, and I almost had to punch a Red Sox fan. But
who was it?
Right. Like a mini-me. Yeah.
I thought you meant the dude who used to travel with Kid Rock.
Oh, which one was it?
Remember? Was it Joey something?
Yeah, it was. No, this was Pedro Martinez's midget.
Okay. I don't think you can say that word anymore, by the way. Not with me. I'm just saying in general. Like, I don't give a shit. In case you were going, like, jumping on a show live, Mike be like, yo, you remember that guy? All right, sorry. All right, thanks for hanging with us. It is part one of the NBA extravaganza that we have for you here on Awesemo. Deeper dive. Myself, Terry is in the house, of course. Mike Awesemo is producing, and then the live before lock takes over just an hour from now. 6 games on the slate, and that's the beauty of it here, Terry, is that 6 games, an hour. You can take as long as you want to answer anything you have here. Not a 13-game slate where you're jammed tight for time by any means. And who knows? We may slip in some other. I'm all caught up now on Dexter. I finished that. I've reached that point in the X-Files where I can now turn my back and say the show has just fallen off the face of the earth, a cliff. So we can throw everything else in here besides the NBA, my friend.
Right on. Yeah, sounds good. What did you think? I mean, let's dive right into that. What did you think of how they wrapped up Dexter? I mean, was that to your satisfaction? Was it where you thought it was going?
Yeah, it did enough justice to how much they massacred the final season and a half of that show. So, yeah. Well, it was much needed redemption, if you will. It wasn't the best ending by any means of any show, but it provided enough closure. And as difficult of a critic as I am across the board with TV, I actually enjoyed it. And I think it actually balanced out the misery that was the end of that first season. Last season. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think it kind of went where we were all expecting without spoiling anything from the ending. Kind of just went down the road that we were expecting. That was the story I thought we were being told, and it got to a satisfying conclusion. And I liked it. I'm glad they made it. Let's put it that way. Like that's usually how I evaluate these reboot and rehash kind of things. Am I glad they made that at the end of the day? I am. It's not. It wasn't a disaster. It was fun to be back in that world with those characters. So I liked it.
All right, and I see this here, Malakar and others, Ozark. No spoilers. All right, I haven't seen anything yet, so I just opened this up because Terry and I, whenever we do shows, it's been a recurring theme of talking about Dexter, and I'm sure in his head he's like, when the hell is this guy going to finish it? So we'll dive into the 6-game slate right now, but no spoilers. At the very least for Ozark. I haven't watched anything. I'm still plowing through X-Files, and I had to catch up on Dexter and all the other stuff. And, of course, we have a 6-game slate tonight, so it's not like I'm just going to be watching Ozark at 9 o'clock tonight. So let's dive into it, man. We'll bounce around, thread some other stuff, as you and I always do. Overall, 6 games tonight. We've been dealing with injuries. We've been dealing with kind of up and down. As we'll get closer to lock, we'll kind of pay attention to any big names here. But just what were you thinking overall, just kind of a general strategy that you had with a shorter slate, 6 games tonight?
I kind of like the shape of this slate that we've got tonight. Just looking at the board, we've got a few big star level upside pieces that you can kind of weave in and out of lineups. And there's plenty of value on the board on both sides. A lot of it coming from like mid-rangey $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 type guys, but there are a few, $4,000 price point at least on DK options. There's at least one $3,600 on DK option, 42 on FanDuel, who I recommended in my article this afternoon, just based on our numbers, our probabilities. But man, it makes me uncomfortable ever writing up Denny Abdija as an option. But he still looks like a reasonable piece on the board here. So there's a lot of movable parts on this one. I think it's a slate where just taking a broad approach to a lot of different mix and matches and combinations and get to a variety of lineups. There's no one really abundantly clear path toward like, all right, these are the massively successful, massively probable guys. There's a couple guys who are drawing really nice numbers on both sites, but it's not that day where we've got somebody, 70% optimal, 60% owned, and we've got to figure out what to do with them. So interesting little slate.
All right. So let's begin. And, we always bounce around here, the deeper dive. We'll go game by game and look at things. Sometimes we have a ton of value and we go really deep. Other times it's just pretty much like, yeah, I like this one guy and we can keep moving on. So depending on how Terry is identifying value as deep as it may be. And let's begin. Celtics taking on the Pelicans. decent total right there. Nothing blowing away, especially when we look at a 228, 231, and even the 220. So it's on the lower end, second lowest actually across the board here on the slate. But just looking at Boston, we know they're top heavy more so than anything. Let's start there as far as how you're approaching the Celtics, especially to the field.
Yeah, I'll have some Celtics. They're one of the teams that I typically, unless it's like an Al Horford day where he's cheap and he pops, or like Horford's out and Robert Williams pops or something like that, I tend to just get shares of the Celtics like where I get them, right? For whatever sense that makes. Yeah. However they come up in crunches, however they come up at the end of the day in my sims and my sorts, I'll take those shares and I'll gladly take them because I think guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown are typically very strong options who have the capability to bend a slate at least, if not break it. But tonight, they're both coming up fine. Both of the star players, 18% optimal for both of them on FanDuel, 12 to 10% optimal on the DK slate. They're both priced appropriately. They're not popping off the page outside of, I'll say that Jason Tatum looks a little under-owned, which gives him the advantage if I'm deciding between the two, but he's a little bit more expensive on both sites. So you're paying the premium to get to the guy that I think is the bigger star between the two, 1.20 fantasy points per minute for the season versus 1.11 for Brown. So I'll lean Tatum over Brown, but I'll take whatever I get out of the two of them. And I would throw the forwards and Marcus Smart into that mix as well. Whatever I get of Al Horford, Robert Williams, I'm happy to take on this slate, and some shares of Marcus Smart. I'm not going crazy for anybody from the Celtics, though.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you look at it, as far as Smart is concerned, he's definitely picking up some decent ownership. If you're looking at it, we have him just under 10%, technically 9.9, enough to at least talk about, right? To raise. It's not like he's at 0.1% and there's any angle right there. Outside of that, though, there really doesn't seem, especially with Tatum popping in at 8.3%. You mentioned Brown there as well at 10%. So all of these guys are super low owned at the very least to the field. So if you were countering, then you have some advantage even to the guys who are heavily owned there on Boston. I don't want to force it by any means. So if you don't want to go any deeper, I don't know where Al Horford, right? If that's the cutoff line, then we can look at the Pelicans, especially because a couple of those guys are popping right now, at least for us with ownership projections and the return to Devontae Graham.
Yeah, a little bit more interesting on the other side of this one, but it's worth touching on the front court. I do like Horford. I think 5,300 for Horford at power forward and center on FanDuel is pretty interesting. 57, he loses a little bit of gleam, but he picks it back up in the fact that he's lower owned and positively leveraged on the DK slate. Over there, you're getting him 5.5% owned, and he's coming up almost 10% optimal. So there's a little bit of leeway there. And then on the FanDuel slate, he's much more popular, 17.5% popular, but 15.8% optimal. So you get some quality out of Horford. Just, with the idea that maybe he gets a little rest. I believe they're on a back-to-back here. So maybe there's the possibility that he sees a little bit less time and it elevates one of the Williamses a little bit more. But we haven't seen any news on that. I'm expecting him to be full go. That's how we've got him projected for his usual 28.1. Robert Williams for a little bit more at a 31.8 minute projection. He seems fine as well. 1.07 fantasy points per minute contributor for the season, 1.20 over the last 3 games, playing 30 minutes a night. He's just appropriately priced, appropriately owned. There's no major advantage that I'm seeing of going to Williams. I'll have some shares for sure. He's one of those pieces that you can rotate through, and it's a personal decision at that point. It's not strongly leveraged either way, so you can decide I want to be above or below the field and not really hurt yourself getting to 15% or getting to 8% versus his 11, 12%.
All right, so let's flip it here. Look at the Pelicans. Guys are popping all over the place, including Alexander Walker right there at the top, but the more we see of Devontae Graham and a couple of great player props, too, that you can take advantage of on OddsShopper. That's free. You can head over there, especially the 3-point prop. We'll get to that in a second here. But with Graham's, coming back, playing more, we saw Alexander still get 30-plus minutes, just struggled from the floor last game out. So I don't know what you're balancing on here. 41%, though, on DK. He's leading the field by a little bit. 10% margin over Porzingis at 31. So let's start with the Pelicans, at least Alexander Walker, and then look at Devontae Graham. Even Josh Hart getting some love here too.
Yeah, with no Ingram out there, Alexander Walker immediately shot to the top of that board on the DK slate where he's only 4,600, point guard and shooting guard eligible. You can move him around. He gives you a nice little flexible piece there for very cheap salary for his general upside. 0.86 fantasy points per minute for the course of the season, 0.99 over the last 3 games, averaging 35 minutes a game over that stretch. So a little bit of an uptick in performance. We know he's capable, if he gets hot with the shot, he's capable of putting up a pretty nice, ceiling score. He's not going to blow through to one of these like 60-point game nights very often, but he's capable of getting out above 40 if you need him to. We've got him projected 27.5 on the FanDuel slate, 28.8 on the DK slate. So there's room there, 42.14% boom score probability on DraftKings for that low salary. That's somebody we can attack. He's going to be 40% owned on the DK slate, so he's popular. He's not a secret, but it's one of those situations where a negatively leveraged guy is more just good chalk. He's a foundational building block piece here. So I'm going to get to a ton of NAW on the DK slate. Less so on FanDuel. He kind of comes up as a compelling mix and match type piece, but 18% optimal there, 24% owned, 18% on the boom score probability. Just kind of a nice mix and match mid-range piece on FanDuel. Devontae Graham ranks very similarly on the FanDuel slate, where he doesn't really rank similarly for 5,200 and point guard only on the DK slate. He still comes up as a good piece there, 17% optimal, 25% boom score, 22% owned. Also negatively leveraged, but if we're just thinking about the idea that there's going to be more to do for all of these guys, any one of NAW, Devontae Graham, or Josh Hart can be an interesting piece here on the wing. You just have to consider that they're all going to be slightly over-owned just going by the numbers. So it's a matter of, I'm going to plug these guys in where I need a $5,500 wing, or in Josh Hart's case, a 67 on FanDuel. And it's a variety of price tags on DK. So you can kind of go whichever one I can afford on DK and just get to a broad share of them as you build differentiated lineups.
So I'm curious on Yahoo, looking at it here. Now, granted, you can only slot them in separate spots, right? Alexander Walker's only at the 2, and then we have Graham only at the 1. So there's no flexibility, but there's no difference either. $18 for Alexander Walker, 19 for Graham. If you had both slots open and you could just put one cheaper option in, who would you get to? And look, to be fair, there are 10% more rostership percentage points to Alexander Walker on Yahoo as opposed to Graham. So there is a little more leverage you have on Graham's side. But if you have both slots open and you had to fill in one cheaper option here at either the 1 or the 2, are you getting to Alexander Walker or Graham?
I would probably let that ownership number dictate that. So I would probably go Graham just based on the virtue of being lower owned. We've got these guys projected like the dead same, 31.6 minutes versus 31.5 minutes. 27, we're going by FanDuel, 27.51 for NAW and 26.36 fantasy points for Devontae Graham. That's the same. So if I can get them at the same price and one's lower owned than the other one, I'll take the lower owned guy.
All right. Appreciate the super chat here as well. Everything. I did put this up. We'll get to this after we get through New Orleans as well. But anybody else you want to hit lower end? Again, a lot of these guys are getting a lot of love, at least at the top where we have it, to even mid-range as far as ownership is concerned. 4 guys, including Herbert Jones, 16% and higher there. So if you were going any deeper on the Pelicans to try to counter some ownership here, I mean, it'd be Jackson Hayes as like a major pivot at the 5. But other than that, as far as them being top heavy, it makes sense because the majority of the field when they're getting to New Orleans is getting to those 3-4 guys.
Yeah, right now, the way the board looks, those are the compelling guys on New Orleans. And then there's Jonas Valanciunas, right? I'm getting to a boatload of Valanciunas in the center spot on FanDuel for 7,400 right now. We just don't know if he's going to play. Yeah. So if he's out there, I love the Jonas Valanciunas spot at 7,400 on the FanDuel slate. 8,000 on DK, I think has a ton of utility. 14.7% optimal over there. He's projected now for 5.9% ownership. If we get confirmed news that he's playing, that'll go up and it'll drop probably, even if not push him into a little bit of negative leverage. I still really like the spot. That's too cheap for him. So I really am trying to get there, assuming he goes. If he doesn't go, then we get that situation where Billy Hernangomez and Jackson Hayes are going to have some value here again. Hayes, power forward eligible on the FanDuel slate. Willie Hernangomez, power forward and center on FanDuel. Not coming up on my board because of a naming issue that I didn't fix on the DK side of things, but you get him pretty cheap over there as well. Jackson Hayes coming up a pretty cheap option as well. So monitor the news. That J-Val news is pretty key to the front court situation there for New Orleans.
All right, we'll keep it moving here. Go to Dallas, Pacers at the Mavs. Before that, though, a couple of things to remind you here. If you're hanging with us, live before lock coming your way in about 45 minutes up until 7 o'clock Eastern. So we have you covered, myself and Terry, then Greg LaMarca up there following us. Hit that thumbs up button again. Subscribe if you haven't already. That does us wonders here. And for all of you people out there in New York and Louisiana, who can now legally place a wager. Just click either link pinned below in that YouTube chat that you see. Browse everything that we have, including you can bet $10, win $200 if any team scores a touchdown in either of the games tomorrow. That's going to happen. So pretty much cash that. And then the free NBA jersey, you bet $100 with Caesars Sportsbook. So we don't ask much in return. Just hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed here as well. But take advantage. New York, Louisiana. It's new. It's brand new for you. We're keeping you invested here in the game by giving you a bunch, pardon me, of different offers there. $100, and then you get that free jersey out there. You going Julius Randle, R.J. Barrett, Kemba Walker. Here's the thing. You can't go old school. You have to go current Nick, all right? That's the rule. It's easy for me, man. I ain't going to do anybody but Embiid because I don't know if they're going to be here in a couple of weeks. Right? But Embiid. See, we got a rock over here, I know. What about you? What current Knicks? Look at this. What current Knicks fan or jersey would you get either for yourself or your closest family member that is a Knicks fan as well? Has to be current, though.
That's got to go RJ Barrett for me. I'm not the biggest Julius Randle fan in the world. I believe in RJ. I like the kid's game. I think he improves and has been, pretty good over the last couple of weeks here. So I still have hopes in our 3 pick from a couple of years ago. Do I wish he was John Morant? Yeah, I do. But I'll take RJ Barrett right now. I like RJ a lot. And if I'm banking on anybody's future from the Knicks right now, that's my guy. So give me the RJ jersey.
Look, Mike has Maxey put up in the chat there as well, which is a very strong number 2 because he's the most likely to be here and not be involved in a trade. Although I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the year. Daryl Morey could put a bunch of guys in if it means getting James Harden back. So it wouldn't shock. Like I'm saying, the only guy that moving forward here is Joel Embiid. So that's the $100 Derrick Rose kick. Daddy Yogi.
Rose, look, man, Taj Gibson's in there. Gotta love it. Emax and Cam Reddish. I don't mind the Cam Reddish one. That's not terrible.
No, it's not bad at all. Emax and House. Now, there was a rumor that Emac left, that he retired from Awesemo to move on for his 2024 campaign.
Not yet. I think he's a little time to prepare left. Okay. We got to go out and hit Iowa, sometime next fall, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I also saw Carlos mention the hat here. I got to give Lofty a shout out here because he put some gear in the mail for me to rock now. So
nice.
I got the official. Now I know.
I got to get that one.
Oh, this one, right? Because I saw everybody rocking the other one. So I wanted to get this one because I haven't seen anybody rocking this one.
Yeah, I have a different one, actually. It's one of our first ones that we did. It was the first one that wasn't like the mesh back.
Yeah.
And it's different from that one. And I think I like that one better. I like more the canvasy kind of material there. Yeah, that one was like the I don't know what the hell to describe it.
See, I know Mike has something because he had to run and grab something there. See, he's got it too.
He's got it too.
But that's more of the baseball. See, he's got like
somebody sent me a hat.
Lofty, the more the baseball flat brim. This one is broken in already as it comes.
Yeah. So you gotta have a broken in thing. Did you get back in the day? Like, did you cut out the hats and put them in the freezer and do all the thing with the rubber band? Were you into all that stuff?
No. What I did was I folded it, and then I'm not going to do this because I don't want to destroy the brim, but I folded it and then I curved the brim and then folded it under the hat so that it went through this hole here, right?
Okay, yep. I used to do that.
That's what I did to make sure that I had that thing.
Yep.
But then again, I don't know. The brim, that's only when I played baseball. I didn't care otherwise,
I always needed a curve, but more importantly, I always had to have, like, now they make them this way where it's just flat on your head. It doesn't have the big mesh thing in there.
Yeah.
Where it like sticks out and it's an inch above your head and it's all like you can push down into it. I used to cut that shit out so that I could have like the flat look that it has now. So just big improvement, hat world. Way to go.
I'm telling you, man, I got a lot of looks today when I was shoveling the driveway. People, is that a new hat this guy's got over here? Look at this, man. I can't wait to wear this thing on QVC. Watch out. All right, let's hit the Pacers, man. We'll look at Indiana first and then move our way into Dallas here. As far as the Pacers are concerned, Sabonis, that's really, I think, the easiest place to start. Of course, questionable. I don't think he's been ruled out, right, as of yet. So we saw what happened last game, the triple-double just last night. Matt May impacted there in that win against OKC to keep him out. But let's just look at the Pacers kind of big picture starting from the top down.
Yeah, and that's 67.6 point FanDuel outing last night for Sabonis in 44 minutes, just monster. I think as we were flying through the slate in the show that I was on yesterday, I said, yeah, wouldn't it be like him to come out and play and break the slate? And lo and behold, he did. I don't think I had a single share of him after saying that, which kind of pissed me off. But yeah, I could see him come out and do the exact same thing again. Not necessarily the greatest matchup in the world for that. So hopefully that tempers it if he does play. If he doesn't go, I don't know what the hell's going to go on in the front court with Indiana here. They're already without what the hell's his name? Excuse me. His name just fell completely out of. Thank you, Goga Bitadze.
Goga.
Yeah. His name fell right out of my head as soon as I was about to say it.
Look, it's not like you forgot Sabonis. You forgot Bitadze. That's okay.
Got Bitadze. So yeah, he's already been ruled out for the day. So I mean, that stretches them really, really thin. Where I don't know if it's going to be Isaiah Jackson picking up minutes or if they just go small and we see some more O'Shea Brissett, who we've got at 21.8 minutes. Maybe he picks up a little bit and they just distribute it around. Give guys like Torrey Craig an uptick. Give Jeremy Lamb, Lance Stevenson. We've also got Chris Duarte was questionable for this game last I saw. So that's another piece that could come potentially out of here. We've got him currently projected at 28 minutes, not looking all that compelling as an option. But if he comes out of this rotation, there's just a lot of minutes to go around now. So I'm not exactly sure where they go. This is one we're definitely going to want to keep an eye on news though, because there's a lot of cheap pieces on this team that could spring into relevance.
Yeah, the one guy, and look, awful night from the floor last night, right, in Karis LeVert, but the guy took 19 shots. So maybe the best thing that comes from that is that he went 3 of 19, not 3 of 12, and somebody came in and was like, yo, man, you got to slow it down. Like, he was allowed to continue because of volume and because of necessity based on, where they can get some points. So I don't know how much you're racing to get to a guy like LeVert, but at the same time, you know that you're guaranteed a shit ton of volume tonight with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we can get that kind of a volume game, we're most likely not going to get 25.9 FanDuel points out of him in 43 minutes. Most of the time he's going to take that many shots. We're going to get more points from him. So I'm happy to go right back there. And he's only 7,600 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard and small forward eligible. Nice amount of flexibility, puts him at a 12.7% optimal lineup rate. So there's definitely something to talk about there with LeVert on FanDuel. At 8,800 on the DK slate, point guard, shooting guard, not really popping for me. 2.3% optimal. You see what that cost uptick does for him over there. So really a FanDuel only play for me. You can mix and match him into a few lineups at that price on DK, but there's really not a lot of upside, not a lot of utility for him at that price.
No, I'm just trying to even see if there's an angle here to play anybody on the Pacers as far as, knocking down threes. And we have kind of developed that here on the Saturday deeper dive, throwing a bunch at Rinpack. You and I have done this too during the week on the NHA shows, but you're not going to find anything really at all. You probably won't even find many books that are giving you an opportunity to bet these guys as of yet until everything is kind of cleared up. So beyond that, I mean, you mentioned Brissett. I mean, we've gone pretty deep here on the Pacers as far as them being cheaper options to go to. So we can shift over to the Mavs unless there's anybody kind of at that bottom that you were looking at as maybe a value play here overall for the Pacers.
Yeah, not really
Brissett's
right now, based on what, guy, based right? on, say again?
Brissett's probably going to be the cheap option that you brought up unless, anything bumps up Dwayne Washington.
Yeah, I think, Brissett's going to be in play. He's 4.1% optimal right now with only a 21.8 minute projection at small forward on FanDuel. On the DK slate at 4,000 flat, power forward and center, 5% optimal already. This is with Sabonis in. If we see Sabonis come off the floor, I think that shoots up. I think we definitely can, expect that. And then, like I was saying, I just don't know where the minutes are necessarily going to fall around a lot of these other pieces. I assume that they're going to play this fairly small because that's what they've got to work with. So, maybe we see a guy like Justin Holiday cruise from the 27.5 minutes that we've got him projected for up above 30, just as a guy who's capable of getting out there and scoring the basketball for them, positionless without really considering where he plays. Maybe that's a guy you can look at for one of those props as well, just looking at him. Taking in normal circumstances, taking 6.9 threes a game, making 2.6 of them, 37.7% from three. Maybe if a couple more minutes fall into his lap, he sees a few additional ones and gets beyond whatever his prop line might be. But nobody really standing out right now for DFS. We're going to need more news on that one.
All right, so the Mavs now, we know where to start here, right there at the top. And yeah, you mentioned a lot, by the way, as far as Valanciunas being out, Hernan Gomez. So we covered that extensively in that first game. I know that a lot of people are focusing now on how to correctly brim your hat. And I have to say, there was a nice veteran move shout there. How about Jason Jeffcoat? Dampen brim, place brim down in glass, and leave overnight. You know about that veteran move right there?
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
That would I'd be concerned about if are we taking it, we're dampening it and we're just putting it in a normal glass with nothing in it.
Yep.
Okay. If that's the case, then yeah, I can see that. What I used to do would be to get the shape in it. I'd put it underwater, get the shape I wanted, put a rubber band around the brim and put the whole thing in the freezer overnight. Then it freezes. Then you put it on your head while it's cold. You wear it all day while it dries out. And then you've got a hat that's molded to your head and a perfect brim. That was my old method.
Nothing better than doing that in the summer too, because you can walk around with
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Day like today, I don't know if I want to walk around with a ice cold hat on my head.
No, not by any means. All right. Well, I mentioned how Alexander Walker, when we were talking about the Pelicans, number one guy we have projected for ownership on DK, a 10-point lead over Kristaps. So we've got Luka on the slate here. We definitely need to talk about Doncic and how you're approaching that with him. And again, about 17.4, 17.5. So he's kind of in that mid-range as far as where we are on this 6-game slate for ownership. But Kristaps is popping big time here. Do you find yourself over, maybe underweight to that 31% projected ownership on DK?
Yeah, I'm shooting to be at least around the field, if not over the field. I think he looks like a terrific option at 7,400 on DraftKings. Power forward only. On FanDuel, he's 8,200, has power forward and center eligibility. And I actually really like him over there as well. Despite the higher price, I'm getting to a good amount of them. He comes up 22.2% optimal, so 10 percentage points less optimal, but still only 24.6% ownership over there versus 31% on DK. You're getting him around the same caliber of play, just at a slightly different price from site to site, and with positional flexibility that gives him a little edge there. So I really like trying to book his 40-point median projection into as many lineups as I can here. And I think there's upside beyond that. 39.4% boom score probability on DK, 24.2 on the FanDuel slate. There's definite upside for Kristaps at those prices. And I think positionally he works in fairly well today because there's not a ton of opportunity cost at center, and you can also roster him at power forward on the FanDuel slate. So I really like the flexibility he provides, the upside he provides. You mentioned Luka. The price is the only thing keeping Luka from popping, extremely optimal. He's just going to come in as a mix and match type play as long as he's priced in this $11,000 price range, which is where he belongs. He's a 1.41 per minute producer, fantastic player. Obviously, a guy we know can break a slate on any given day. So I'm happy to get beyond the field on Luka if I can. I don't know that I can on either site, and he's negatively leveraged, so I don't really care if I don't. I'll definitely have some. But if I don't go over the top and get beyond the field, I'm not really worried about it. I'm happy to take it where I get it, but I'm not really sweating it.
He's not a rush as far as the pay up option when you look at where we are on this slate. And look, we've got a bunch of other guys that are going to be classified as pay up options by all means. Porzingis total is at 1.5, and I wonder how aggressive. Look, he only took 3, so the volume is not there to really go over even 1.5 last game, Terry. But before that, it's just hard to ignore 7 attempts against the Warriors, 7 attempts again before that against Memphis from 3. So while the over-under is sitting at something decent here, if he's taking 7 threes tonight against the Pacers, now granted, blowout factor, I get that. Dallas pretty good at home, but if he's taking 7 threes, I can get 3. Like I can get a 3 for 7, 3 for 8 type night. That's plus 280 on the books. You think that's worth a little sprinkle?
I do think that's worth a little sprinkle.
Because you would tell me not, right? You wouldn't just have me waste my money on a bad bet like Ben Rassa does on the Odd Shopper betting show when I throw shit at him, right?
No, yeah, I actually like you. I want you to win money, so I'm or at least not lose it. So yeah, definitely. I think that's at least interesting, right? He takes 5.2 a game under normal circumstances. We know they've lost Timmy Hardaway, which we'll get into a second. That's doing good things for Jalen Brunson, for DFS on this slate. But I think at 5.2 a game, with the idea that maybe he takes a couple additional ones in this spot, he's only been making 1.5 of them a game because he's shooting 28.5% this year from 3. Yeah. He's a career 35% three-point shooter. So he's much better than this. If you get 7 3 attempts from him for this game, I think he could get to that 3 for you. I don't hate that.
Okay. Now we just need him to get.
Now we need him to get there.
Exactly right. All right. So Luka, Kristaps, 2 guys clearly that we want to talk about right away at the top there. But, Dorian Finney-Smith is getting a lot of love on our projected ownership. DK 4,400. You can roster him both the 3 and the 4 there. So definitely a cheaper option here. And also, if you wanted to look a little bit lower as far as another option or two, Maxi Kleber is also popping at 3,800 as a pivot at the 5. Can we get any deeper than the top 2 guys on Dallas?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've got Kristaps there. We've got Luka there at the top of the board by raw point projection, median point projection, one of the top overall options. But I think Jalen Brunson is very interesting, more so on FanDuel at 5,600, point guard and shooting guard eligible than he is at 6,100, both guard positions as well on DK. But he's really interesting on both sides. I mean, 21.6% optimal on DK, slightly negative leverage, but it's efficient ownership. You can get to him as a mix and match piece there. He's very negatively leveraged on the FanDuel slate, but he's coming up in so many of my lineups. I expect it's just one of those good chalk situations. Negative 14.9 is a daunting negative leverage score. He's owned in 50% of the slate's lineups. So maybe I'm going to try and undercut the field. But when I ran my sim earlier with the lineups that I had, he was just coming up in so many of the top ranked lineups here that he's very difficult to ignore at that price. And just with no Timmy Hardaway in there, he's going to step into minutes. He's going to step into opportunity. He's a 0.96 fantasy points per minute player for the season. I think there's plenty on the bone there for Brunson. And then for price, I really like the idea of getting to some Dorian Finney-Smith, who I don't typically love to get to. 0.72 fantasy point per minute player. Maxi Kleber, 0.78 fantasy point per minute player, but they cost nothing. 4,300 and 4,000 on the FanDuel slate, 4,400 and 3,800 on DK. Maxi, I wish had power forward eligibility, but at least you've got the util spot on DK where you can roster him alongside another center. So he's got value there. 13% optimal, 21% boom score probability for the cheap price, and similarly rated on the FanDuel slate. So I think these guys run probably 5 deep today. I don't think we need to go to the Reggie Bullock, Frankie Smokes level, but yeah, I think Porzingis, Brunson, DFS, Kleber, and Doncic are all in play today.
All right, let's hit the Kings here. 10.5 point road dogs in Philadelphia. We know all about Joel Embiid. We'll talk about the Sixers coming up, but it's just hard to think. That line right there, higher total as well, feels like a blowout. This is not the homer in me, anything like that. Just feels like the blowout, which actually I think can favor the Kings more. Like if it's a 20-point game, you're probably going to see Halliburton and looking at that from a Kings standpoint out there more so than you would see Embiid. Let's look at the Kings first. I don't know how deep you can get with Sacramento here. Bad team taking on the Sixers on the road, 10.5 point dogs, and then maybe a little bit more with the Sixers, Terry.
Yeah, Sacramento is kind of a team that it's another one of those ones where I'll take some shares of some of these guys, but outside of De'Aaron Fox and a little bit of Halliburton on the right slates, I don't love getting to Sacramento all that frequently. I know Gunn was enthused about Marvin Bagley this morning. They discussed him. Oh, by the way, it's Maxi Kleber's birthday today. I believe that was another EMAC one from this morning. So for people who care about that.
Wait a second. Is it really his birthday, or is it like the 3 guys we have in chat wishing me and Lofty every time we're on, like happy Spencer, wishing him a happy birthday? Are we sure it's actually Kleber's birthday, or
I believe
Awesemo birthday?
I'm just trusting my buddy EMAC on that one, but he threw that at Gunn this morning. I believe it is Maxi Kleber's birthday.
All right.
So. January 29th, 1992. That was his 30th birthday.
I never doubted Gunn for a second there. EMAC, I know he's got a million different stats jamming him in there. Just to be sure. That's all.
That's it. Absolutely. So yeah, I just going back to the Sacramento side, I know those guys talked up Marvin Bagley a little bit this morning. I never really loved getting to him. 0.91 fantasy points per minute at 4,800 on FanDuel, 53 on DK. Not really for me. Harrison Barnes is fine as a mix and match piece. Tyrese Halliburton, fine as a mix and match piece. All these guys are basically priced appropriately. Rashawn Holmes is getting owned aggressively on the DK slate. He's probably the most compelling piece though, because he only costs 4,800 over there. He's a $6,000 center and power forward on FanDuel, which knocks him below 10% optimal, leaves him at a positive leverage mark over there because he's only 7% owned. But on DK at that cheap price, center only, he's coming up 12.9% optimal. He's owned a lot more than that, 17.9% ownership. I don't love the spot, but I think it's worth getting to at least some shares. I would probably look to be under the field, but I would probably get to it a little bit. Maybe if I just match that optimal lineup rate, right? Come in around 12, 13% on him, and I think that'd be fine. 1.04 fantasy point per minute player, 1.1 over the last 3 games, averages 25 minutes a night, kind of is who he is, but I think he's priced a little bit cheap on the DK slate, so we can get to him over there.
All right, so before we hit the Sixers here, you're going to have to get a little creative, but both of these guys have tons of volume. especially assuming that they're going to be down, or maybe they catch the Sixers sleepwalking, and Halliburton and Barnes going to be a big reason we know no Fox out there. Their totals are sitting at 1.5. Now you're juiced up on both, right? Over 1.5 for both of them, but it's just hard. Same game parlay gets me at plus 165. I go over Halliburton threes, 1.5. I go over Barnes threes, 1.5. These guys are going to have a lot of volume already to knock down 2 threes. And on top of that, they're probably going to get their ass blown out of the building. So normally I only give you one. I'm just going to cheat here a little bit and make a nice little same game parlay with those two going over their 3 totals.
I don't mind that at all, with the idea that they're going to get a few additional looks.
Absolutely.
They're both making 2 a game already. So you're basically there on normal circumstances on a good night. So yeah, with an idea of an uptick, I have no issue with that one whatsoever.
All right, hit that thumbs up button, please. Tell you all about Prize Picks, what we have going on there in a second, but we have to hit the home team here. And again, 10.5, 10-point line as this thing is moving. Keep in mind with that, you go to Odd Shopper, already see where we have a bunch of projections, especially Embiid, a lot of them on the lower side, but that doesn't necessarily mean he can't have a huge night when it comes to DFS. So let's start with a big man. This guy is on a tear, odds-on favorite to win the MVP. The only thing that's stopping him right now, Terry, is either an injury or COVID, knock on wood. So Embiid, you talked about Doncic as far as a pay-up option. How about Joel?
Yeah, I really like the idea of getting to some Joel Embiid here. 11.7 is a hefty price tag on DK, 11.4 on FanDuel, center only on both sites. You get him with the util option on DK, of course. He's coming up around the same on both sites, 13% optimal on FanDuel, 10% on DK, negative leverage on both, but it's a situation where I don't really care about the negative leverage here. I think he's just going to be our most likely shot to be our highest scoring center. I think you're safe plugging him in and not really worrying about anybody else that you might be missing out on at the position. A lot of the other frequently optimal centers are eligible at power forward on FanDuel. You can use the util spot to roster them both on DK. I want to be in the Joel Embiid business, I think, on this slate. I haven't gotten to a ton of them in a lot of situations where there weren't some centers I was sacrificing through the year, and I feel like I've missed out in spots. So he's at a 1.9 fantasy point per minute rate over his last 3, 1.6 for the season. I want to be a part of that tonight. So if he goes bust, it's probably my fault, but I'm gonna ride the Joel Embiid train here for sure.
All right, how about Mike Awesemo's Tyrese Maxey here, $24 on Yahoo. You see, as far as on DK, somewhat of a workable price here. We also have Tobias Harris and, no Seth Curry there. That might bump up someone like Furkan Korkmaz in the lineup as well. But anybody other than Embiid that you're looking at targeting from either a cost-effective standpoint or just eat the chalk because the return standpoint. And again, we have to kind of just tiptoe a little bit, because even if Sacramento catches the Sixers sleeping in the first quarter, first half, the talent discrepancy, at least with Joel Embiid on the floor, is enough to say that the Sixers could go on a run or two and easily put this thing out, limiting some minutes for some guys. So anybody other than Embiid that you've been targeting here, Terry?
I will take whatever shares of Tobias Harris I get and then maybe trim like 10, 15% off of that. He's fine. He's not overly inspiring. He's priced appropriately. He's owned appropriately. Tyrese Maxey is the guy who's very interesting to me on FanDuel. 6,000 point guard and shooting guard eligible. Comes up 30.7% optimal. If not the highest, I don't have the full board in front of me, but if not the highest, one of the highest and most frequently optimal players on the FanDuel slate, projected at 31.5 median FanDuel projection, 25% boom score. He's going to be owned by nearly 40% of the field. So we start to get into difficult territory when we talk about him at 40%, Jalen Brunson at 50% ownership. It's going to be a chalky build, but those guys are coming up so frequently that it pays to include them. Just use them as building blocks and make sure you're differentiating in other spots. Get to differentiate combinations, get to a variety of combinations, and you can work around the negative leverage and the massive ownership numbers on those guys. So I like getting to some Maxey here. The rest of this team, I'll take in minor shares wherever they come up. Nobody really stands out to me, although it looks like this board still had Seth Curry in. So with the next update, we might catch that, maybe you do see a little bump for a Korkmaz, from a Matty Thybulle, somebody like that. I would expect those guys climb a little bit. I don't know that we're going to get them climbing into the range where they're going to be a must-play type of a situation, though. Just a mix and match kind of a rate.
Yeah, I agree. A guy like Korkmaz, who might get bumped up to the starting lineup, has an even tighter window of you better go do something before blowout minutes come, because he's not going to straddle that line like George Niang maybe all of a sudden becomes interesting if they're blowing him out. But that's a risk in its own right. All right, let's hit the Heat Raptors game. Before that, though, we remind you here, everything brought to you by Prize Picks. You can get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can follow along with everything that we're doing here, our projections, all the things that are on site here at Awesemo. Click that link below, and when you sign up to Prize Picks, it's the home of the over-under. So if you don't know what you're doing, just go to Odd Shopper. It's a nice free companion for Prize Picks. Sign up with that link below. We'll match your first deposit up to $100. And as mentioned here, you're going to get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, Raptors under that 6-point road dog against the Heat. But as we know, anytime Miami's in business here, we've got a super low total. So we'll start with the Raptors going up against a tough team defensively, especially in South Beach. I don't even know how much you're trying to get to Toronto tonight, Terry.
It depends on where Fred VanVleet comes in. Right. If Fred VanVleet, he's currently questionable. Haven't seen any news update. 8,600 on FanDuel, 87 on DK, point guard eligible on both sites. We've got him projected as in right now, 37.8 minutes, a monster minute share. Coming up 15% optimal on FanDuel, 11.6% on DK. If he doesn't play, that has a cascade effect on the rest of this team where other pieces become interesting. Gary Trent becomes more interesting. OG even is more interesting. Scotty Barnes is more interesting just by virtue of there being more to do out on the court for these guys. So I'm kind of waiting on the Fred VanVleet news to see which pieces of the Raptors I get. I suspect that they'll come up in medium shares across the board because they're all, relatively fairly priced. I'm interested in Pascal Siakam at 8,800 on the FanDuel slate. If there's no VanVleet, I think that gives him a nice little boost. 9,300 on the DK slate is starting to press it a little bit for me. Only 4% optimal, and it's already a situation. I mean, it's not like he's going to see more minutes. It's just there's going to be more opportunity for him to do things without Freddie VanVleet taking all his action. So it's interesting to me, but not a smash spot, not one I'm going to really go out of my way for. The guy that I'm kind of curious about is what happens with Gary Trent if we get Fred VanVleet out. 6,000 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard and small forward, 5,400 on DK, shooting guard only. There could be opportunity there. So I'm going to wait on that Fred VanVleet news. Right now, everybody just kind of looks like they're priced as who they are. They're owned as who they are, except for VanVleet because he's getting the impact of that Q tag.
So if VanVleet does play, how much are you getting to him, and what does that do to impact everybody around him?
So that just means it'll be a situation where I'm just drawing whatever I get. If they fit in at their price and they don't look egregiously negatively leveraged and most of these guys won't be, then I'll take what I get of them. But I'm not going to really go out of my way. I think they become more interesting without VanVleet. VanVleet would be the most interesting player to me if he is in. Although Scotty Barnes at an 18.9% optimal rate on FanDuel is actually kind of interesting. 6,300 small forward, power forward. I hadn't really spotted him. And I'm curious, let me see where he came up in this latest crunch if I still have it. See how much of him I got to. Actually, it's not going to be easy for me to view. Never mind. But he'd be interesting at that price, at that rate either way, assuming that that's not going to change. 34.6 minute projection. So the price is actually probably a little bit low on FanDuel for Scotty Barnes. 6,700 is more appropriate on DK. And you can see that in his optimal rate. He's optimal less than 10% of the time. So basically cuts it in half for a minor uptick in salary.
All right. So beyond that, just to kind of flip it over if we can, because I feel like there's going to be some more options, or at least a wider spread, if you will, to choose from with Miami. Hit that thumbs up button, please. If you're hanging with us live before lock comes your way, 17 minutes. So more information, more news that comes out, you can hit up as we continue really up until 7 o'clock Eastern once this slate locks. But Miami, we can kind of bookend it, right, with Butler there at the top and then all the way down to the cheapest and maybe one of the better, if not best, punt counter options you have here, Duncan Robinson, who is still very cheap, especially on Yahoo, where you can get him at $13. So let's kind of bookend the Heat from top to bottom.
So Jimmy is probable to play as of the last time I saw. He's got, it seems like he's going to be out there.
Trending towards it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I like the price on him. $8,700 is pretty cheap for a 1.28 fantasy point per minute player on the FanDuel slate, 86 on DK, small forward, power forward on DK, small forward shooting guard on FanDuel. interesting positional flexibility on both sites. He's more frequently optimal on the FanDuel slate, but I think he looks pretty good on both. Slightly negatively leveraged on DK, but it's not one I'm going to worry about. It's Jimmy Butler at a fair price. So happy to get to him wherever I get to him on DK. And I think I would probably look to get over the field, even though he's technically negatively leveraged at a -1, 23.2% on versus the 22% optimal rate. I think that's a spot where I would want to squeeze ahead of the field by just a little bit based on the fair price for the median projection that we've got on him, over 40 points and an 18.23% boom score probability, a little bit of upside on that 40 points. So I think I want to book that a little bit ahead of the field. Bam looks okay on both sites, not really standing out. I feel like the $7,300 price on DK should be cheap, but he's not really rating out that way.
Yeah.
Only coming up 16% optimal, 26.5% boom score probability. So not really splashing as much as I would have thought at that $7,300 price, which is a little curious. Tyler Hero looks like Tyler Hero. To your point, Duncan Robinson at a $4,500 price on DK has a little bit of value. At that $13 price on Yahoo, he's kind of interesting. 25-minute projection on him, 0.73 fantasy points per minute for the season, but 0.96 over the last 31.3 minutes a night. So if he sees a little bit of more playing time, I could see him paying off that 13 on Yahoo. Where I don't like him at all, $5,800 on FanDuel. Ooh. That is way too expensive. So won't be getting to any of them on the FanDuel slate.
It's amazing how one site is completely caught up and the other just giving you that break right there. 3,700 on DK. I ask because nearly 12% of the field is getting to PJ Tucker.
Yeah, he's fine. He's never a player that excites me. I know he's making his threes this year. 0.73 fantasy points per minute for the season still. He's been at 0.94 over the last 27.3 minutes a night over that stretch. 31 FanDuel points in 29 minutes the last time out. It's fair production for the price. I hate to say it because he's so uninspiring, but yeah, at 3,700, he comes up 8.9% optimal on the DK slate. For that price, you would expect somebody that the field is getting to at that rate to be a little bit more frequently optimal. So he's negatively leveraged. He's not the play for me, but I wouldn't say anybody's making a mistake by rostering him around the field.
All right, so let's move to Memphis here. Wizards in town. Now we start to get to the two high totals on the board. A reminder here, please hit that thumbs up button if you're hanging with us by all means. Anybody have any news on Jonas Valanciunas? Please let us know in the chat because we're still awaiting for this.
Oh, I thought you called that out earlier.
Oh,
he's officially out.
No, I know. It was the joke. Are you kidding me? Oh, my goodness. Everybody says I don't pay attention to the chat. Here I am making a joke about the chat, and both of you guys are looking at me like I've got two heads on.
Guilty as charged. Well, it's because you mentioned it in passing. We never went back to it, but guilty as charged. I was ignoring chat completely throughout this show.
Unbelievable. All right. So let's move to Washington here. All right. Start with the Wizards. Take it anywhere you want. Beal at the top. We can start with Kuz as well.
You don't want to start with Denny Avdija, the guy that I mentioned at the top of the show?
It's your world, Terry McBride. We can start with whoever the hell you want. We can start with Jonas Valanciunas right now if you want.
Look, we definitely they'll clean that one up on the live before lock. I'm sure that will be a major source of conversation over there. But we talked about the value that gives Willy Hernangomez and Jackson Hayes. I love the power forward eligibility on Willy Hernangomez on the FanDuel slate. So those are your plays from that Jonas Valanciunas situation. I'm going to have to get a lot of J-Val out of this crunch. But taking a look at this Washington-Memphis game, yeah, I think Bradley Beal, definitely interesting. 9,000 on shooting guard on FanDuel, 8,900 point guard and shooting guard on the DK slate. Comes up as another guy who projects nicely as around a 40-point median projection, but just kind of owned who he is, probable as who he is. He's appropriately priced. You're not getting any kind of discount, but he looks fine. I would definitely get to He's 11.6% owned on DK. I'd like to be around 15%, get a little bit beyond the field, around 15%, maybe 20% on FanDuel. There's a little bit of room to get ahead of the field on Beal. Denny Avdija, like I mentioned, is cheap on both sides, multi-position on both sides between both forward spots. More expensive on FanDuel against the higher cap at 4,200, 3,600 on DK. He's coming up 16.5% optimal. Nobody wants to roster this guy. 12% ownership, 4.4 leverage score on the DK slate. Very similar looking numbers on FanDuel. I think it makes sense to get ahead of the field, as uncomfortable as it might be on a 0.83 fantasy point per minute guy who's performed it down to a 0.77 rate over the last three. I think there's something there. I think there's some reason based on our probability marks to go back there again. So makes some sense to me. Spencer Dinwiddie at 5,800 is fine on FanDuel if you want to get to him. 6,000 on DK, also fine over there, just not frequently optimal. And the rest of these guys are just kind of in that same boat where they're coming up here and there, but it would just be a smattering of mix and match pieces for me for the rest of that team.
Yeah, if anything, if you're hitting to that point with any of those other guys, it's probably just going to be a cheap pivot.
Yeah.
Right? As far as just saving some money.
Yeah, if I want to, yeah, if I've got, a limited amount of money and all of a sudden I'm trying to decide and I need, if I could spend 4,600 on somebody who's 6% optimal, or I could spend 44 on KCP who's 6% optimal, then sure, you can plug in as long as you're making an apples for apples trade with that kind of a guy where you're saving a little bit of money, probably saving a little bit of ownership, and that's helping you pay for something important. That's the key piece to that, is what it's helping you pay for. So yeah, as long as you're doing that intelligently, I have no issues with getting to those guys, but that's all they are on this slate for me.
All right, so let's keep it moving here. Memphis on the other side, we should have a little bit more flexibility with where you want to begin. Now, Ja right up at the top. So we've talked about a couple of pay up options here, including Luka, on this slate overall at that point spot. So Ja now, how do you approach him as far as a pay up option across the board? We still have Brooklyn. I know we still have Harden to get to, but just looking at the point spot with Ja.
Yeah, he comes up fairly similarly optimal to some of those other options to Luka specifically, who we were looking at. I think it was around 18% if I'm remembering correctly. And that's where we're finding Ja in the optimal lineup on both sites tonight. The price is healthy. It's mid tens on both sites, but for his production, I think that's pretty fair. And when we're comparing it to an over 11,000 price on Luka and some other expensive options at the position, it makes him kind of appealing here. 1.37 fantasy points per minute for the season, 57.3% true shooting, 33.8% assist ratio, 57 FanDuel points in his last outing in 36 minutes, 1.54 fantasy points per minute in 38 minutes a game over the last three. There's nothing not to like about Ja Morant. I even mentioned earlier in the show that I'd rather have him than my guy RJ Barrett, whose jersey I'm going to get for free. So yeah, love Ja Morant here. Monster total median projection, right? He's projected as a almost 50-point DraftKings night. There's good reason to get to that. So I'm happy to get to Ja. I think DeAnthony Melton is interesting on this slate, particularly on DK at 4,600. That's too cheap. He's coming up nearly a quarter of the time in the optimal lineup. So I definitely want to be in the DeAnthony Melton business over there. You can make an argument for Desmond Bane. Jaren Jackson's a guy who's definitely interesting to me on both sites. I definitely want to be getting to various pieces of this Memphis offense and this Memphis team, rather. I don't know how many of them I would have in the same lineup. I feel like it's just a situation where I'm going to get one of these guys in a bunch of different lineups rather than a bunch of lineups with a bunch of these guys, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I definitely think so. When you're just trying to build, again, because we're at the back end of the 6-game slate. So it's not so much about jamming Grizzlies in here. It's about looking at Ja and then trying to find if there's one or two other guys there. And look, you mentioned Bane real quick before we keep things moving here. He's averaging 3 makes. He's taking a bunch, just looking at that was kind of a floor game that we saw last time, but he's pretty much 3 of 7 each and every night. I could stretch this just a little bit here. It's against the Wizards. It's at Memphis, 4+ threes, which probably should be somewhere around 250 to 280, is sitting at plus 330. Now, it's a reach. I get it but Bane's over-under is at 2.5. So half unit, 4+ threes, Desmond Bane plus 330.
I don't hate that. Yeah, you're getting a nice price for it, right? You're making 2 points. Yeah, making 2.9 a game, taking 6.8 a game. No Dylan Brooks. You expect to see, maybe a couple additional looks. I have no issues with that. I think you're getting paid on that nicely if he gets there. So yeah, I like that one.
All right. Anything else? Brandon Clark, you want to hit at 4,800 on DK for the 4-5 spot?
He's fine. He's not.
Say no.
Yeah, he's not a no, right? There's very few guys that I'm ever just going to say flat, he has no use to me whatsoever, right? At 4,800, power forward and center eligible, Brandon Clark, who comes up 6% of the time in the optimal lineup, that's not a flat no, right? He's only projected at 21.3 points. He doesn't look supremely useful. He's negatively leveraged because he's being owned 6.5% of the time. But there is the possibility that as a plug and play guy, you can just put him into a lineup when in that situation, like we talked about before, where maybe you're considering a $5,000 guy who's 6 or 8% optimal. And then you've got Clark sitting there at 4.8, and maybe that pays for the difference at a different position for you. So I think he's got a little bit of utility. There's not a lot there though, projected under 20 minutes.
All right, so let's hit now. Final game, final couple of minutes, live before lock coming your way at the top of the hour. We were charged earlier by Justin on the chat to get through all of these games by 6 o'clock. I even put back another derailment that I had for you here as far as movies with a blizzard in it. But we're pretty good shape here as we have the Nets in Golden State. Beautiful thing here is with Brooklyn on the road, we know there is Kyrie Irving, so we can factor that in there. No Durant, which is still a big thing. We've talked about pay-up options, especially at the point spot outside of Harden. So let's start with Brooklyn, Harden, Irving, then we can move from there, Terry.
What we're going to start with is there's one answer to that question, and that is The Shining. Stanley Kubrick.
That came up a lot. That definitely came up a lot.
Look,
I don't want you to
just...
number one. Number one? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's got it. I mean, that's one of my favorite all-time movies, just flat period. And it's the one that immediately sprang to mind, Blizzard movie. I don't know that we can do much better than The Shining. So
I got to give Mike Awesemo some credit, as I do Leibowitz here on the chat. Both ridiculously strong answers there, and that's Groundhog Day and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So both different genre, but they're going to give your answer a run for its money.
Both fantastic answers. I was going to try and throw in that we didn't see the Blizzard and Groundhog Day, but we certainly do, even though
yes, we do.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. I was trying to work my way around it, but yeah, no, that's those are two spectacular answers that I didn't come to immediately. I love both of those movies, probably equally to The Shining. So yeah, great job on both of those guys. Well done. That's a solid question. There's some good answers to that.
There are. Yeah. Snowpiercer is on TV. That doesn't count. All right.
That was a movie first.
Was it?
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent movie. Yeah. Really good indie sci-fi movie. Chris Evans.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Very
I have
good.
to go back and watch it and then apologize to the chat next week. Is that what's going to happen here?
You do. You absolutely do. Did anybody mention the Danny Glover masterpiece Switchback?
I don't think. Yes,
probably I'm the only one who's seen it.
CR1 Spy One. Just put that up there. Look at that.
Somebody got it. Nice.
Yes.
Well done. Somebody else who watches cable at 4:00 in the morning.
Look, Butthole hits you with Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. Very underrated Blizzard movie. That's a freaky one, but absolutely.
That's one I don't actually know. I got to check that out. I don't know Dreamcatcher.
Check that out. It's an old Stephen King one. All right, so
let's get into this last game.
Top to bottom here. All right. James Harden, let's start there. The pay-up option, that is. Spies Like Us, great one. Wow. All right, sorry. James Harden.
I mean, they're in Siberia, though. Does that really count? I thought we were talking about like American Blizzard. Spies Like Us is a fantastic movie as well.
Okay, we'll strike it from the record.
Go check that out. Yeah.
You're the judge.
Things that are square. Things that are being electrocuted. All right, let's get into this thing. Talking about James Harden, off the top of the board, 25% optimal on the FanDuel slate. We know it's an extremely good spot. 10-2 is probably cheap. I love the fact that he's shooting guard small forward on FanDuel. He's an $11,200 point guard on DK. Just extremely different pricing, extremely different positioning from site to site. 15% optimal. He's fine. I'll take my shares of James Harden on DK as well. Projected over 53 points in the median. Projected right at 50 in the median on FanDuel. But I like him better on the FanDuel slate. I don't really sweat the 30% ownership. It's James Harden. I'm happy to get there. I think LaMarcus Aldridge looks kind of interesting for the Nets at just 5,400 center power forward on FanDuel. A little bit less so, 5,600 on DK. Similar story with the rest of these Nets where they just kind of come up as mix and match type pieces. Kyrie Irving included, 9,400 on FanDuel. Point guard, shooting guard only comes up 6% optimal. On the DK slate, 95 point guard, shooting guard, only 3% optimal. So just feels like Kyrie's maybe priced a little high for what we're expecting for him for right now. But I think we can get back to this level of production, this level of price. And certainly it wouldn't totally shock me if Kyrie went out and bent the slate in 35 minutes. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. Outside of that, those are the Nets I'm really keeping my eye on. Everybody else is just kind of mix and match pieces.
Yeah, no love for Kessler Edwards, 4,600 DK. I've learned my lesson betting 3-point props with Kessler Edwards. I can say that. No, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you talk about the cost versus where the field is with Kyrie, and then also just balancing up the pay-up option with James Harden at the top. So we can move on to the Warriors unless there's anybody else that you wanted to make an argument for here.
No, really, it's those top few guys from the Nets side of things for me. I like the situation. I like the game total. I think it's going to be a good game for DFS production. And one of those guys from like the $4,000 range could surprise. I'm just not really sure which one it might be. I think it makes sense to maybe mix and match some shares of like a Kessler Edwards, even a Nick Claxton. You could throw him into some shares. He's not very optimal. He's not very interesting, but I think one of those guys is going to pick up a little bit of action here. Patty Mills is the more likely guy out of that mid-range to see some action. He's 8% optimal on FanDuel, 5% optimal on DK. Again, not overly exciting or interesting, but there are some shares that you can spread around if we're building a big, diverse portfolio.
All right, so we have Steph at the top clearly, and not even technically, especially like Yahoo, you can get him at $40. So we have the Steph Curry approach, and then everybody else from Wiggins to still a cheaper option in Klay Thompson, as much you can get him, again, $18 on Yahoo. So from Steph, Wiggins, Klay, let's kind of approach that trio. And I love, by the way, Wiggins' three-point props tonight. I've already bet him, so I'm not even going to throw it at you so you could talk me out of it.
keep my mouth shut on it then. And I wrote up Andrew Wiggins this afternoon for DFS, probably for the first time ever, but I think he looks good. 6,000 on both sites, small forward eligible, definitely coming up frequently optimal on both, 19% on FanDuel, 16% on the DK slate. He's efficiently owned, but he's a nice piece. I think that price is a little bit cheap. 0.93 fantasy points per minute over the course of the season, 0.98 over the last 3 games in 32 minutes a night, put up 40 in the last game in 36 minutes. So I really like getting to Wiggins shares. By the same token, I think Steph is $9,500 Steph Curry, when we're comparing to some of those other point guards, is cheap on this slate on FanDuel. 10-5 is a different story on DK. I'll have just as much of him as I'll have like the Hardens and everybody else of the world at that price. But it's a situation where I'll probably have basically even shares of a lot of those guys, where I think he's actually kind of a target for me on the FanDuel slate. I love getting to Steph. I'm one of his bigger fans, I think, at the site. They were talking about him on the morning show, maybe hiding a hand injury. He put up 52.6 FanDuel points in 38 minutes in his last time out. That's not quite enough for the $9,500 salary, but on a 6-game slate, that's probably enough. So I'm happy to get there. I'm not really too worried about it. Klay Thompson for 6,200. We know what he's capable of. For 55, he's a lot more interesting on DK though. So I'll have a few shares of him on FanDuel. I'll have more of them on DK, where he's 10% optimal.
Don't sleep, man. Andrew Wiggins, 3+3s. I got in at +190. And Otto Porter, I sprinkled a quarter unit +470 on 3+3s.
Ooh. All right.
Aggressive. I know. I'm not giving the Porter bet out. Don't hold me to it by any means. I just threw it out there by all means. All right, my friend. Anybody else that we need to hit on the Warriors before we get out of here?
Nobody that's really like thrilling. You can get Jordan Poole's coming up 11% optimal on the FanDuel slate. Kevon Looney's coming up 12% optimal, but he's owned 22% of the time on FanDuel, which I think is aggressive by the field. On DK, he's a lot more efficient, 7.3% optimal, 9% ownership at 4,800. For 4,900, I don't love that spot for Kevon Looney. Lower ownership, if he was owned around his optimal rate, I'd actually be looking to get to that spot because he's center end power forward. I think he'd be interesting. But at -10 leverage, I don't really like that spot for Kevon Looney. So probably going to be getting away from that, undercut the field on that one.
All right. We appreciate everybody hanging, as always, with us. Greg and Matt coming your way right now, live before lock. Thanks to Mike Awesemo for producing. Thanks to you all out there. Hit that thumbs up button, please. Stick around because we have 59 more minutes of content. So all of the news, the late stuff that's coming in, all the way back to Jonas Valanciunas. Now you all can talk and ask Greg and Matt everything that they think about him and beyond. So we appreciate you all hanging with us. Again, thumbs up, like the video, subscribe, all of that. Click the link for Prize Picks. Terry, my friend, always a pleasure.
You too, buddy. This was a fun one, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the boys have to say about the J-Val situation.
I know the chat will ask. We'll see you soon.
You think?
Is the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show. Mike, very kind enough to unmute himself for the countdown here. There was moments there where Mike didn't realize that he wasn't a part of the show, but of course, how could he not be in his full Philadelphia garb, 76ers hat, Temple sweatshirt? He's got everything together. Joined here by Matt LaMarca. Show sponsored by Prospects. Do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It really does help us out a whole bunch. Matt, we've got a lot of New Orleans Pelicans guys to talk about. Probably going to dominate the next hour. How you doing today?
I'm good. Enjoying some of this Brady stuff. I'm a known Brady, not hater, but being a Jets fan, it's hard to, be like, oh man, I'm just so happy for Tom Brady. So this, it's been a rough stretch, like having to watch everybody who's ever watched a football game post some sort of gushing tweet about how great Tom Brady was.
So the other thing too is you and I were talking about, and Mike thought he was talking to us about it too, but he was on mute, so he wasn't actually a part of the conversation anyway. But so what it appears is happening here that you kind of pieced together, I think makes a lot of sense in terms of the Tom Brady situation. He wanted to announce his own retirement. Adam Schefter scoops the news. I think it would be hilarious if we have Schefter, or we have Brady is so bitter about Schefter leaking this news that he just decides to come back just to make Schefter look like an asshole. Does Tom Brady have enough spite in him to pull off something like that?
Yeah, that feels more like a Rodgers move, but I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, let's be honest. If he wants to play, he's certainly still capable of. I mean, the guy's either going to finish first or second in the MVP balloting this season. So he still has football left in him. It's pretty crazy how good he has stayed when you watch what's happened with guys like Roethlisberger and, guys like Phillip Rivers in the previous years, who came in the league after him, are almost a decade his junior, and he still is just so much better at a more advanced age. It's pretty crazy.
Well, even more importantly than that, we've got an NBA slate to talk about, and just kind of a summary. Let's talk about the New Orleans Pelicans news. I've heard tell that the chat is pretty fired up that Jonas Valanciunas may or may not be out today. He is indeed out. There's been a lot of back and forth, people asking about his status. He's out. Troy Murphy's out. Brandon Ingram's out. Didi Loazada is out. Not that he really matters, but long story short here, a lot of value on the New Orleans Pelicans. How are you handling this team? Are you loading up on them? Are you trying to differentiate? What are you going to do here?
I don't know if I'm necessarily loading up on them. I think, it's going to be a very similar lineup to what we saw from them yesterday. And it's not like they provided a ton of value. You've got Willie Hernangomez. He stands out as a clear smash at 5,100. The only question with him is always just minutes. And when you expect him to get minutes, you can pretty much pencil him in for a huge performance. So I like him. I'll have some Josh Hart at 6,500. But again, I think that the level of value play drops off pretty quickly after Hernangomez when you look at this Pelicans team. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I'll have some. Devontae Graham, I'll have some. And then Josh Hart. That's really kind of it for me. If you wanted to sprinkle some Herb in there, that's cool too. But Herb's just not really a guy that does it for me. So yeah, I don't know if that makes me underweight on the Pelicans. I think that's something that I'm cool with.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that right now I am getting a pretty good amount of exposure to. We'll see once ownership updates and how that all comes together. But I just want to make sure that we kind of started by talking about them because this is a team a lot of players are going to be rostering. Our ownership rankings are free today. A little different than the ownership projections. Ownership rankings something different, but just to highlight some of the value that people are getting to from the Pelicans today. Most recent run of ownership. Willie Hernangomez, starting with DK, projected for 57% ownership. NAW, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the second most popular player on the slate, projected for 39% ownership. The fourth most popular player on DK is Josh Hart. The fifth most popular is Devontae Graham. So 4 of the 5 most popular plays on DK are coming from the New Orleans Pelicans. Then over on FanDuel, Willie Hernangomez projected for 76% ownership. And then not quite as popular as they are over on DK, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Devontae Graham, Josh Hart, all projected for over 20% ownership on FanDuel. So let's dig into today's slate. And also, guys, don't forget, not only are Matt and I going to be breaking down the slate for the next hour, We'll be sticking around 30 minutes after lock to break down whatever happens afterwards, talking some prize picks, talking props. And these are some of the injury news we're waiting on that could break during that last half hour. Fred VanVleet is questionable. Kyle Anderson is questionable. Chimezie Metu is questionable. Bielitsa is questionable. Who really cares about him? But he's on the injury report, so might as well bring him up. Let's start by talking position by position, Matt. And the guards, are you looking to pay up at the guard position, or is it a position you're more looking to spend down at today?
I'm spending down, I think, for the most part. There's not a ton of guards who stand out as like super appealing values to me. You've got James Harden, but he's going to have Kyrie Irving back. Harden is certainly still capable of putting up a big game with Kyrie Irving in the lineup, but I do think he's a smidge overpriced for that situation. You've got Doncic at 11.4. He seems a little bit overpriced given what he has done this season. I think the guard that I like the most would be Ja at 10.3. But he's another guy still that I think I'm expecting a little bit of regression for. You look at that usage rate over the last 4 games, it is approaching 40%. I don't know if that seems like a high number for him. A lot of those games have come with Desmond Bane out of the lineup, with Dylan Brooks out of the lineup. Brooks obviously still out, but I don't think Ja is going to be a 40% usage guy for the rest of the year. So I'm expecting him to come back to reality, but even if he gets us somewhere between 50 and 55 DraftKings points, you would take that at 10,300.
Yeah, and actually my favorite guard from Memphis is somebody who I'm really struggling with as I'm just kind of balancing my lineups now and trying to figure out what I want to do. D'Anthony Melton is such a good fantasy producer. And it seems like whenever he's in a good spot and everybody's like, hey, it's time to play D'Anthony Melton, the Grizzlies go, not so fast. D'Anthony Melton's playing 15 minutes tonight. And remember, we had this chalk slate. Everybody's out for the Memphis Grizzlies like 2 weeks ago. And Tyus Jones was out. Dylan Brooks was out at the time. Kyle Anderson was questionable. He was out. And we got the situation with D'Anthony Melton. We only played 17 minutes. But the last few games now for Melton, the minutes have been pretty consistent. And as a result, I have to project him fairly well because last 4 games, 27 minutes, 31 minutes, 24 minutes, 28 minutes. If I give him 26 to 28 minutes, he's one of the best value plays on the slate on DK. FanDuel's a little different because he's priced up, but I'm finding it difficult to get away from him on DK. What the hell am I supposed to do with this guy in his minutes, though? How much confidence do you have in his playing time?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about Melton today, to be 100% honest. And that's the sign of somebody who's about to get burned by D'Anthony Melton. But I feel better about rostering him than I do Alexander Walker at the same price tag. Alexander Walker, he didn't start in the last game. He still ended up playing a good 33.6 minutes off the bench. But even if his minutes are a little bit safer than Melton's, he's not the same guy on a per minute basis. And if you look at the team expectation, right, the Pelicans are implied for 103.5 points tonight. The Grizzlies are up near 118. There's just so much more points available with the Grizzlies. So the fact that Naw is going to be more popular than Melton to me is a mistake. And that's something that I will look to take advantage of.
Yeah, I have them projected fairly similarly, but with that said, the most recent run of ownership, we have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 39% on DK compared to D'Anthony Melton at 23%. Given that kind of gap, when I have them projected pretty similarly, yeah, I do prefer Melton for tournaments. It's just really hard for me to get behind the minutes, but maybe we shouldn't feel all that secure in Nickeil Alexander-Walker's minutes either. Now, I know you're a little lighter than him than the field. I still assume you're getting to some shares of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. How much less do you like him than the field does?
I think I have about 20% at the moment. It's a slate that's somewhat light on value. We don't have a ton of like sub 4K guys that you can feel great about. So if you want to get up to some of these studs, you do need to find some value options. And I have some Walker for sure. But again, I think that 47.5 point outing that he had 2 games ago, that's like a bit of an aberration. I think he's more of a 30 fantasy point type player like he's done in his last game and 2 games ago. And I'll certainly take 30 at 4,600. I just don't think it's a pure smash spot for him.
Yeah, and then talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker over on FanDuel, that's where I really get concerned about him because 4,600, I do feel like there's a lot more wiggle room in the 4,600 price tag than when you get to him over on FanDuel at 5,500. At the same time, he's also much less popular on FanDuel, though still projected for over 20% ownership. So how do you view Nickeil Alexander-Walker on FanDuel, where he's a little more expensive but a little bit less popular?
Yeah, I think I'm cool with going almost a full fade on him on FanDuel at 5,500. That's like a pretty substantial price tag. And again, if I think he's only going to give us 30 now at 5,500, that makes him a viable fade. It's still 5x, but I don't think you're winning a tournament if you have a $5,500 player in your lineup and he's only going to give you around 30. And again, that's like, he can have a worse game than that. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. I think I have his median projection at around 30 points. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I have him. Let's see. I have him for 31 fantasy points right now, which obviously would not be an issue. At the very least, play Nickeil Alexander-Walker in cash games. I'm also going to be playing him a lot in tournaments. I'm a little bit higher on him than Matt is, but I do have some concerns about Melton and Walker. Not enough that's going to prevent me from rostering these guys. What about somebody like Devontae Graham, who's also going to be fairly popular on both DK and FanDuel today? His price is a little bit higher than Nickeil Alexander-Walker's, but I also think there's more playing time security when it comes to Devontae Graham. Do you prefer him to Nickeil Alexander-Walker? And do you think he's somewhat of a pivot play? I know he's still going to be popular, but he does come with less ownership than Alexander-Walker.
Yeah, I do have a bit more exposure to Graham at the moment. I don't think, again, it's like a smash spot. 5,200 is it's not steep, but it's also not cheap, right? And Graham has averaged about 0.86 fantasy points per minute this season. So if you want to give him 35, 36 minutes, I think that makes him a good bet to return value, but I do somewhat question the upside with him.
I don't know that I really question the upside. I mean, we've seen games where Devontae Graham, just 2 games ago, he scored over 40 fantasy points. So I'm not too concerned about the potential upside. It's just what happens in Nickeil. I think him and Nickeil Alexander-Walker definitely have a negative correlation. They're both very scoring dependent. I have some lineups with Graham and Alexander-Walker both in. I'm trying to weigh if I actually want to try to reduce the amount of ownership I have of them together, maybe setting, a group rule in Fantasy Cruncher where if I have both of them, if one of them is in the lineup, it reduces the projection of the other one by 20% or something like that. Are you doing anything to try to prevent them from being in the same lineup, or is it just whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, I think that's a sharp rule. For what it's worth, Graham has only seen a 1.7% usage bump with Ingram and Valanciunas off the court. So pretty minimal there. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is the more substantial beneficiary, 6.1% usage bump. So I do like the idea of building a rule around grouping those 2 players together or avoiding those 2 players. And I probably do think I have to lean a little bit more towards Alexander-Walker, just given the bigger usage bump and given the the cheaper price tag. I probably will adjust my ownership up slightly on him and down slightly on Graham.
And by the way, because we're getting questions about Graham is officially probable for today. I know people look into game time decision means nothing. People care so much when players are listed as game time decision isn't even a listing designation. If you look on the injury report, you're going to see guys are either out, probable, doubtful, questionable. Game time decision doesn't exist within the statuses of players. Game time decision just means this is when the team is going to make a decision. If a guy is probable but a game time decision, they're still likely going to play. Somebody's doubtful but a game time decision, they're probably not going to play. Game time decision doesn't really mean anything to me. It's just the timing of when the injury is going to ultimately end up coming out. Is there anybody who's lower owned at guard as a value option you think makes for a good pivot off of some of the chalky plays?
Yeah, it's a tough slate for value at guard, in my opinion. So I don't really have a ton. I'm looking a little bit at some of the Heat guys. You've got, again, no Kyle Lowry there, but Jimmy Butler is expected to suit up. But still, Gabe Vincent, Max Struss, they are seeing minutes. They should catch. Well, Max Struss, not so much in their last game, but they should catch no ownership. And I do think they have some upside. Vincent has a nice leverage score here in the boom bust tool. So it's tough. It's tough slate to find value at the guard spot. And I do think we should mention De'Aaron Fox officially ruled out now. So that's another, big piece of news that we kind of have to consider. Maybe that makes a guy like Davion Mitchell now a slightly more appealing target.
By the way, as I'm talking about Devontae Graham and saying how game time decision means anything, two pieces of injury news that came in while you were talking. One you just mentioned, De'Aaron Fox out. The other one, Devontae Graham starting, Willie Hernan-Gomez starting. So the starting lineup today for the New Orleans Pelicans, Devontae Graham, Josh Hart, Garrett Temple, Herb Jones, Willie Hernan-Gomez. Not anything different than what we're expecting to happen here. But let's talk about the impact of De'Aaron Fox being out, something that I don't know changes all that much versus the last few games just because De'Aaron Fox has been out. But is there anybody you're looking at on Sacramento now who maybe you were on the fence with that now you're like, I want to get this guy in my lineups now?
I'll have Halliburton now. It hasn't been pretty for Halliburton the last two games without Fox, but he has still been very good in games without De'Aaron Fox for most of the season. He's averaging just under 41 and a half DraftKings points per game in that situation. And that's with, two sub 30-point games back to back. So prior to that, he was, well over 45 DraftKings points per game. You can still get him at sub 8K. I think, again, his ownership should rise now with this news, but he played nearly 38 minutes yesterday, or in their last game, excuse me. I think Halliburton becomes somebody that I'll be overweight on.
I'll see what his ownership looks like. His price has kind of gotten to a point where I think it's about fair. I have him projected for just a little bit under 39 fantasy points. He's 7,900 over on DK, FanDuel. Halliburton 7,700. So a little more appealing looking on FanDuel and DK. Will he make it into some lineups for me? Yeah, probably, but not as a core play. If somebody's just playing 1, 3, 5 line, something like that, I don't know that I'd recommend Halliburton. I think you're best off leaving him out of the mix. Do you view him as just somebody who's viable for you or somebody who's like, you really want to play Halliburton now?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a core play, but I do think he's a nice differentiator for me. That's kind of how I'm viewing him. If the field is going to have him in like 10 to 15% of their lineups, I'll be, double to triple that. 20, like 30-ish% would be, I think, a fair approximation for him. The way I see things. Again, it's hard to find guards that I really like on this slate. So Halliburton becomes somebody that I think is pretty intriguing that I can plug in that mid-range price. Like, him versus there's really nobody in between 7K and 8,900, 8,700 outside of Halliburton. So that's a pretty wide disparity. I kind of like that for him.
I interest you in any Davion Mitchell, because now as I'm kind of updating some of my information, trying to put stuff in, there's a couple of guys that it looks like I'm going to be getting to from the Kings here. One of them is Davion Mitchell. Mitchell started last game. I assume he's going to start again. Played really big minutes, even in a blowout. So the game against the Hawks last time out, not particularly competitive. The Kings lost by 17 points because they're the Kings and they're just a total trash bag and they suck. But 31 minutes from Davion Mitchell, still at a reasonably cheap price. That's appealing to me. The other one also is Harrison Barnes, who's been really difficult to nail down this year, but the upside's pretty apparent. Just here are his last handful of games, for instance. And by the way, not somebody you should ever be considering to cash games, but this is something that makes somebody like this appealing to me in tournaments. 38 fantasy points, 35, good. 23, 22, bad. 42, good. 12, bad. 43, good. All over the place, Harrison Barnes. But pretty clearly, he's priced for his mean outcome here, which is just in between his two situations. He's either going to fall way short of this price point or far exceed it based on what we've seen from him in the last couple of weeks. And in these games without De'Aaron Fox, that's something that's appealing to me in tournaments. And I think people are going to shy away because they're uncertain of what to make of him, which you should be. You should be uncertain. He's been wildly inconsistent, but inconsistency is generally a good thing for me in tournaments.
Yeah. And keep in mind too, there's no Terrence Davis for the Kings, who has kind of been playing, significant minutes, especially while Fox was out of the lineup. So I do think it's a very good spot for Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell. And sort of in that same vein, Buddy Hield has been terrible recently, but he's a guy that, has upside, right? He's a guy that has 40 plus fantasy points in his bag. So I don't have any Hield yet, but if you're looking for ways to maybe get a little bit different with the Kings, Hield is somebody I think you can consider.
Yeah, and if Hield ends up starting, that wouldn't totally surprise. I was surprised when Davion Mitchell started last game. I assumed Hield was going to start. So we'll see what that starting lineup looks like. It wouldn't be the most surprising thing to me if Hield starts, but right now I'm going to project it as if Mitchell is going to be the guy. We do have a super chat here from D Niz. High dollar single entry DK GPP. Best last man in utility for 4,700 or under. All right, I'm going to sort my projections here, and let's see, who do I have as the highest projected player? Under 4,700. Well, that would be Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I assume that he already has Nickeil Alexander-Walker. D'Anthony Melton would be another option. Steven Adams is somebody who at 4,700, I don't mind. I have him projected fairly highly. So assuming that you probably have Nickeil Alexander-Walker in your lineup, or if you're trying to differentiate, I would say Melton would be somebody to go to there. But if you are looking to get pretty different, I don't mind Steven Adams at 4,700. What is your answer? 4,700 or under utility spot. Who are you going with?
Yeah, it's close for me. Certainly, I think Alexander-Walker has the highest median expectation, but I kind of like Melton and now Davion Mitchell a little bit more just when you factor in ownership. And if I can cheat a little bit, I wouldn't hate pivoting. Like let's say you have Nickeil Alexander in there. I wouldn't hate a pivot down to Davion at 4,500, which then gives you 4,800 for your last spot, which allows you to get up to Rashawn Holmes.
That is cheating a little bit. I mean, we also don't know what the rest of his lineup looks like, but I don't mind that either.
And I answered his question and then I approached it a different way.
Fair. All is fair in DFS talk shows, I guess, as the people, as a wise man once said. But yeah, let's see what happens with Metu. Also, I still think of Rashawn Holmes as being a really high upside guy. I know we haven't seen it as much recently, but there's still something to be said for he was coming back from an injury. And his minutes have slowly trended up. I think the biggest issue is that these games are never competitive. And I might be under projecting Rashawn Holmes' minutes just because he hasn't gotten the minutes since coming back from injury. But keep in mind that the Kings have never played in a competitive game ever. I don't think in the history of their franchise this season. And it might happen tonight. And let's see, what is the spread at right now for that game? Kings still 10.5-point underdogs.
Yeah.
Keep it close, Kings. Do it. Keep it close, you losers from Sacramento. Keep the game remotely close. Because you do have to worry about, and I don't want to go too heavy into Holmes because we haven't obviously gotten to center yet, but he does have to deal with Embiid. You know that presents some potential foul trouble, avenues. But like, even if you're just projecting Holmes to play exactly what he played last game, which was a little bit over 28 minutes, he has crazy upside at 4,800 in 28 minutes. Like he's a guy who's averaged over a fantasy point per minute this year and can go well over a fantasy point per minute in the right situations. So I get the matchup concerns are there, but it's just a price tag that's like very hard for me to pass up. As expected, the softest man in the NBA, Jimmy Butler, will be playing today. He had a toe boo-boo, but he's going to be okay to play. Nobody with a false or tough guy nickname than Jimmy Butler, who's
Shots
basically
fired.
I mean, he's the guard version of Anthony Davis, and people like think he's some kind of superhero or something. There's no difference between Jimmy Butler and Anthony Davis in terms of going to the locker room during games and all that. There's just a different mentality that Jimmy Butler brings when he misses his games. Super chat here from Michael Pazzulli. Hey, fellas, 2 favorite small forward eligible players under 4,500 on FanDuel. All right, 4,500. Small forward. Small forward, 4,500 and under on FanDuel. All right.
For me, it's going to be Dorian Finney-Smith at 4,500. And I would say probably Kessler Edwards at 4K. They're kind of boring options, like high minute, low fantasy per minute production. But I think that those are the two guys that have the highest median expectation at the time being. If you wanted to go with somebody with a little bit more upside, I don't know. It's kind of hard to find someone. So I guess I'm just going to stick with DFS and Kessler.
It is DFS and John Conchar for me. And
Ooh,
a little, also something I should add here is that Kyle Anderson's questionable to play. I currently don't have him in my projections. I have him out. And that is something that also opens up extra minutes. Also, getting back to the Jimmy Butler thing. How long do you think it's been since Jimmy Butler played 60 games this season? Jimmy Butler, the Iron Man, the tough guy who never gets hurt, who sticks at everything. How long since he's played 60 games in the season?
I don't know. Tibbs, he's a Tibbs guy, so his body has been broken. I think the Jimmy Butler narrative comes more from his mindset than his physical body. Like he earned a lot of fans and respect for his performance in the bubble a couple years ago.
Well, he played 65 games in 2018. He has played over 70 games twice in his entire career. He gets hurt a lot. He sits a lot of games out. He gets owies, but Anthony Davis catches all the flack for it. Jimmy Butler misses just as many games. Just every once in a while, you gotta throw some oil on the Jimmy Butler flames. Let's see. Any other guards that we haven't talked about here that are key pieces of your builds?
No, not that are key pieces. I do have some Clay at 5,500. I think Clay is at the point now where he's definitely in play. I mean, he's averaged 1.15 DraftKings points per minute since returning to the lineup. And he's now given us at least 25 and a half minutes in back-to-back games. He scored at least 27 and a half DraftKings points in both of those games. He went for 37 plus in his last contest. So I think 5,500 is actually pretty fair for him. He kind of fits that argument where I don't know if he can give us 40 plus, but I feel pretty good he can get into the 30s tonight. So I do like me some Clay at that price tag.
All right. Some more super chats by the way, somebody said, look at these guys, which are not even Matt. Matt can't get looped into this. This is really just a me thing. Look at these guys. They're on the computer calling Jimmy Butler. What, Jimmy Butler doesn't own a computer? Jimmy Butler uses the computer too. Where am I supposed to do it from? I would say it to his face. I don't have access to him. What am I going to do? Devin,
I would love that.
Yeah, I don't have access to him, or else I would happily say it to his face. Some more super chats to catch up on. Devin RJJ, Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Aldridge, last guy in. I prefer Nickeil Alexander-Walker to LaMarcus Aldridge. You?
Yep.
We've got from Cheyenne DeWald, need two of the three on FanDuel, Time Lord, Triple J, or Halliburton. So which one of those are you leaving out? Time Lord, Robert Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyrese Halliburton.
I love Jaren Jackson Jr. I love Tyrese Halliburton, and I'm meh on Robert Williams. So that's how I would rank them. I know Williams can go off in certain spots, but I still like the other two players a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, and it's I just view Robert Williams differently when Al Horford's in the mix. There's less playing time upside for him. The chance of him having a bunch of defensive stats and hitting a ceiling obviously still exists, but it's not that realistic. I'm much more apt to play in those games when there's no Al Horford. Super chat from Ryan Nelson 02. Jimmy Butler scared of Jokic brothers. Quote from Greg. Oh. Yeah, he is. And by the way,
human.
Yeah. How about the yeah, it totally reasonable to be afraid of those giant Serbian men. One of them has also fought in a professional Muay Thai, I think it was. Might have been an MMA fight too, but totally reasonable to be afraid of the Jokic brothers. There's no shame in that. I'm terrified of them. Some more questions in our Discord channel. We've got here from JEW. Any interest on Drummond, assuming there's a blowout? Or is that digging too deep? Yeah, that's digging too deep for me.
Yeah, I was fine with Drummond being used on Thursday on a 2-game slate. It's a lot different to play him on a 6-game slate.
Yeah, and the blowout angle, I get it. And we just talked about the Kings, how infrequently they keep games competitive. And it is a double-digit spread, but still, I can't really predict a blowout just because the Kings suck and the spread is kind of wide. Because look at the other games on the slate. Dallas, a massive favorite over Indiana. Golden State's a pretty significant favorite over the Nets. If you're saying that that game is a blowout, well, there's similar spreads in those other two games also, and then you kind of have to consider them blowouts. So at some point, we're going to have to roll the dice with some of these potential blowout situations. Another question on our Discord channel from Rabashua. Talk me off of Kyle Kuzma in a FanDuel GPP. I've come around on Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma rules this year. But with that said,
I'm way out on the Kuz.
So I like Kuzma. I regret the jokes that I've made about him, but there's not as much upside in him when Bradley Beal's in the mix. It's just the reality of the situation. FanDuel points from over the last few games, 39, 22, 54. He had that 151-point game, 34. It's just not the same usage or upside there when Bradley Beal's in the mix. Once that price tag comes down a little bit more, I think we can go back to Kuzma. Better plays it forward for me today, though.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the scoring is way down over his last his last 6 games. He is averaging 16.2 points per game. Unless you think he has another 16 rebound or 20 rebound performance in him, I just don't know where the upside is coming from.
Yeah, no, that's really how I look at this too, where if he is going to be playing in games, if Bradley Beal, we find out, oh my God, Bradley Beal got hit by a truck outside the stadium, they're still going to play the game, I'd be like, oh, Kyle Kuzma looks like good value. But, as of right now, just about appropriately priced. So other guys I prefer
still
to
play
get
the
to.
game, you think?
Yeah, what are you kidding me? The people bought tickets. Big shooter, 215. Dinwiddie thoughts on FanDuel. Let's see.
I have none. It's a fair price, but again, I don't play any of the secondary wizards for the most part, unless Bradley Beal is out. The only wizard I think I really have any exposure to at the moment is Denny Avdia, and it's a sprinkling of exposure, and I hate myself for it.
Yeah, I know his price has come down. He's 5,800. He was 6,700. I don't look at that price though and just say oh, Dinwiddie is a good play now because his price has come down. He's still not playing all that well when Bradley Beal's on the court. He scored over 25 fantasy points once in his last 5 games with Beal active. You generally need Beal to be out for Dinwiddie to have real viable fantasy value, and that's just not the case right now. So no go on Dinwiddie for me. We got another super chat from Chill 13Ls. Thoughts on Sabonis now? Didn't give a site, but Sabonis, who was uncertain to play. Then we got the news that he was on track to play. Then they were unsure, but now we know that he's going to be playing. Domantas Sabonis today. I have exposure to him, but less than 10%.
I actually have a decent bit of Sabonis. I think he's a very interesting tournament pivot. He has been a different player over the past 2 weeks or so. The upside that we have come to know and love about Sabonis is back. Just over his last handful of games here, 71.5, 57, 47 and a quarter, 43 and a half, 37, not so good, but 59.25, 58 and 64. He is giving us routinely games in the 50s, occasionally 60s, and he hit 70 yesterday. So the fact that the Pacers are big dogs is obviously not great, but you have no Miles Turner, you have no Goga Bitadze, you have no Malcolm Brogdon. So there is just not a lot of talent and not a lot of depth behind him. I think that he is going to be underappreciated for the second straight slate.
Yeah, and by the way, by no means do I advocate for you guys to go run over Bradley Beal with cars to try to find some extra value in DFS. Crazier things have been done to get an edge in DFS, but I am not responsible for anybody's actions. This is just
you're not ordering a Tanya Harding.
Yeah, this is an entertainment program. This is not what we do to find value in DFS. But if you're going to do it, give me a heads up in advance. That's the only thing I ask. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you guys are signing up at Prize Picks for the first time, use the promo code Awesemo. Get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. You also get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up at Prize Picks for the first time. Matt and I are going to be covering some of our favorite Prize Picks plays in the 30 minutes following lock, which is just coming up in 19 minutes. Let's head on over to the forward position now. And of the forwards, I'm finding it really difficult to get away from Kristaps Porzingis. I have a lot of exposure to Kristaps Porzingis in best ball. I play him in DFS all the time, and he's not appropriately priced today. On FanDuel, he's at 8,200. It's okay, still a little bit too cheap in my opinion. $7,400 over on DK. That is way too cheap. I know the minutes have been light for him in the last couple of games, 25 and 27 minutes, but these were not competitive games. He's going to go right back to regular minutes today, and the pricing algorithm, particularly on DK, way overreacting to his minutes being down the last couple of games.
Yeah, and I think some of my favorite lineups that I have right now are Sabonis Porzingis stacks, right? We're hoping to get good minutes from both players in a competitive game. I think it makes sense to stack both guys up. But yes, I agree 100%. Porzingis is underpriced. He has routinely displayed like 40 points in his arsenal, like a median kind of outcome as being around 40 points. I think that's a reasonable projection against a garbage defense like the Pacers. And we know that he has upside for more. So I think Porzingis is a great play at 7,400. The only concern is he's probably going to be one of the more popular pay-ups at the position. But that's why, again, I kind of like pairing him with Sabonis. I think that's a really interesting sort of mini game stack, and it's going to differentiate you.
Yep. I don't mind that shout out at all. A forward who now, as I'm uploading the final version of my lineups and looking through some of these players, going through it, I'm getting to a pretty good amount. And it's somebody that you had mentioned before is Dorian Finney-Smith. And there's no Tim Hardaway Jr. for the Mavericks, I assume, for the rest of the season, considering that was a fairly bad broken foot and we're halfway through the season at this point. There's just a lot of minutes to go around there because this was a team that was already pretty thin. Unless they're just going to go out and play like Reggie Bullock a ton of minutes or something like that, I think Dorian Finney-Smith could be a real workhorse for this team down the stretch. I like getting to on both sides. I know you mentioned before you didn't think it was a sexy play, but is he somebody that is making into a good portion of your lineups?
Yeah, I have a decent chunk of him, and I'm probably underselling his sexiness a little bit, right? He's not like a guy who can never hit a ceiling. He has some games where he gets into the 30s. He's got 39 points against the Thunder just 2 weeks ago or so. So he has some appeal as an upside play, and you can feel pretty good about the floor. The minutes should be there. Guys who are this cheap and are going to play, 30 plus minutes, upwards of, even 35 or 36 minutes, I think are pretty safe investments. And DFS does have a bit more upside than I alluded to earlier.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, he's one of my most rostered cheap forwards today. So I have no issue getting to that at all. We do have a super chat here from Charles. Hey, does Dallas have any value plays? DK showdown question. Yes, they do. And actually, I'm going to pull up the showdown pricing because I don't have it in front of me. But presumably, based on what we were just talking about, Dorian Finney-Smith is probably one of the best value options in that game from a showdown perspective. I'm pulling it up as we...
Yeah, he's 5K on showdown, which I think is fine. Maxi Kleba is 3,800. I think you can play him too.
I've got one for him. Frank Ntilikina at the flat min. If you were looking to go stars and scrubs and jam in Sabonis, Porzingis, the showdown pricing is totally different. And I don't want to tailor, like 15 minutes of the show just to Charles here, but just the way the showdown pricing structure works, and that there are guys to pay off for on the slate, like Luka, like Sabonis, like Porzingis, you're getting a flat min price out of Frank Ntilikina, who's scored double-digit fantasy points in each of the last 2 games. He's probably going to be playing 15 minutes or so at a min price. You don't need that many points for him to be viable, especially if the top end guys go off. So Ntilikina would be somebody to look at there. Bouncing back to the forward position, I like Herb Jones today. I feel like you kind of undersold him before. I'm going to back up my guy Herb here because...
Not on Herb.
Dude, he's been good lately, and he's playing so many minutes that it makes it hard for me to avoid him when he's fairly cheaply priced on FanDuel and DK. 34, 37, 34, 39, 37 minutes. Competitive games, we're looking at like 38 minutes from Herb Jones. Still cheap. He's been a good points from a fantasy producer this year. I'm playing some Herb.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I have some. I just I bet I'm underweight to Herb when all is said and done, because I'm using him pretty much exclusively at power forward or forward. I have just gobs and gobs and gobs of Willie Hernan-Gomez and Rashawn Holmes, so I don't have a lot of space for Herb at center. And there are just other power forwards I like more. Right. He did get us to 42 in his last game. I think that's obviously a fluky performance. He had 5 steals. He's a decent per minute guy. He's at a 0.73 for the season. So if you want to give him 35 minutes, I think that he should return value. But again, I don't love the upside. I feel like I've said that about every player on this slate. But I don't love Herb's upside.
Yeah, I feel differently. I don't think he's going to get 5 steals again, right? That's not going to happen. But it's more just his price, how many minutes he's playing. And for the season, still 29 minutes per game, 22 fantasy points. And if we're looking at 38 minutes or so, like I have him projected for, then, we're looking at high 20s fantasy points, low 30s fantasy points. And at his price point, something I could get behind. So I'm going to be rostering Herb Jones here. Who are some of the other forwards that we have not talked about yet? Actually, I'll mention one guy here who I've kind of brought up in passing, but John Conchar, I understand the production hasn't been there for him recently, but some of the same reasons that we liked Melton before. There's extra minutes there for John Conchar, particularly if Kyle Anderson gets rolled out. Who are the other important plays for you at forward?
Yeah, I think that the Grizzlies are an interesting team at forward because we kind of talked, I alluded to the fact that I really like Jaren Jackson. I don't think that that's something that really needs to be delved into all that much. We talk about Jaren Jackson, I feel like, on every show. The guy has a crazy ceiling, but he also has, a floor that, is real at this price tag. But when Kyle Anderson's out, I feel better about him being a 30-plus minute guy. And I have no problem paying this price tag for him, especially when he's projected for pretty minimal ownership, 14% I'm seeing on DraftKings. So I like him quite a bit. And then I don't hate a little Desmond Bane at 6,200. He's kind of stepped right back into that same role. I kind of mentioned, I think that Ja's usage comes down a bit moving forward. I think Bane is the guy who picks up some of those additional shot attempts. 6,200, I think, is a pretty fair price tag for him, given what we've seen this season.
Yeah, I don't mind that. By the way, it's funny. I'm just going through my exposure run through. Who I'm overweight to now? Who'd be the funniest player for me right now, given some of my comments today, to be overweight to at the moment?
Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler, baby. It's a Jimmy Butler night. Listen, everybody knows I've long been a fan of Jimmy Butler. Oh, one of the toughest guys in the NBA, never misses games, no matter Seriously. What. Tough as out. Listen, debilitating toe injury. They almost had to amputate it. He's going to go out there and play today, and he's just not really priced correctly is the most important thing here. So
I heard that it was almost like a Ronnie Lott situation where they were like, Jimmy, we might have to cut it off. And he said, just cut it off. I want to play.
Exactly. He's as tough as they come. 8,600 on DK, 8,700 on FanDuel. He's one of my favorite payoff options on the slate. And I don't really understand why his price has come down so much, nor do I not understand why he isn't uber chalk. Jimmy Butler at this price point, I think probably warrants being one of the most roster payoff options on the slate, and he just isn't. So as I've been telling you guys all day, you want to play tough guy Jimmy Butler today. You want to play him. He's not priced right.
It's definitely a great price tag for him. I have some Butler too. I have more Sabonis just because that's kind of the stand that I'm taking today. But yeah, like Butler has paid off this price tag basically all season. Still no Kyle Lowry. The only thing that is slightly concerning is this matchup between the Raptors and the Heat could be just an absolute grind. The total is at 209.5 right now, but that's not a huge deal for a player like Butler because he can score fantasy points in like so many different ways. He can hit the glass, have some assists, some defensive stats. So he should be able to overcome a game that maybe isn't the greatest fantasy environment.
And we've got Adi Yogi saying nothing like two guys who have never gotten off the couch talking about the toughness of another man who's never done it. I don't know. Matt is catching unfair stray bullets here because he has said nothing negative about Jimmy Butler. It's only been me. And I'm playing Jimmy Butler today because the points per dollar dictates that I should be playing Jimmy Butler today relative to his price on DK and FanDuel today, which is really all I care about. Jimmy Butler, I'm sorry I said mean things to you. Come through for me today, and everything will be okay, because now I know he's playing for my heart. Any other forwards that we should be talking about today?
I kind of glanced past Denny when we were talking about like just values, but I think if you're looking for a pure punt forward, he's the guy. The minutes are kind of trending up. The production has been okay over the past 4 games. He's 3,600. It's hard to find a guy that's cheaper than that I feel comfortable playing today.
By the way, because I didn't mention it before, Fred VanVleet is in, so it's just not going to change anything with the Raptors situation. Let's move on over to the centers now, and I guess we just start by discussing the Willy Hernangomez situation. Jonas Valanciunas is out. When Jonas Valanciunas plays, they don't usually have Willy Hernangomez in the rotation. But then all of a sudden you take Jonas Valanciunas out and they go, we're playing this guy all the minutes he could handle. Kind of hard to avoid him. Last 2 starts, 30 minutes, 32 minutes, 46 fantasy points, 51 fantasy points. He's my most rostered player today. He's going to be chalk. Whatever. I'm differentiating elsewhere. Play Willy Hernangomez, especially in cash games, even in tournaments. I'm getting a lot of exposure to him.
Yeah, I think he's a clear candidate for the lock button. I haven't done it yet, but we still have 8 minutes. That could change. He's just an absolute monster on a per minute basis. And the minutes have been there, as you alluded to. So if he gets another 30 plus minutes tonight, I feel very comfortable that he gets into the 40s in terms of fantasy points. That's just what he does. I'm giving myself just a couple of outs, because I'm also extremely high on Rashawn Holmes and some of these other, power forward, center, dual eligibility type guys. But if you wanted to lock button Hernangomez, I would have no problem with it.
All right. It's been a while since I've had to do this, but we have absolutely emergency injury news here. This is breaking, crazy, earth-shattering news. I haven't had to do this since the last time this guy was downgraded to questionable. James Harden, questionable to play, came out of nowhere. We all thought he was playing today. And this isn't the hamstring injury. This is a hand injury. So something totally new that we were not aware of.
Oh, boy.
James Harden, questionable. What's happening here, Matt?
That's massive, massive news. That game is the late night hammer at 8:30. It starts a half an hour later than every other game on the slate, at least. It's a situation that I think you kind of want to try to prepare for now in these last 6 minutes. Build yourself some, I don't know how you do it. You build some Harden lineups and pivot down to Kyrie, or maybe you just build Kyrie lineups. And if Harden is in, you figure it out. I don't know. What's your game plan?
It's a tough one, especially because, all right, if Harden's out, there's clearly value in guys. There's clearly value in terms of guys that are going to be improperly priced, or maybe not even improperly priced, but are going to be too low owned from what they should be. Because Kyrie's 9,500 on DK. We've got LaMarca Aldridge at 5,600. There's also Patty Mills and priced up to 5,500. Nick Claxton is back in the mix. So I don't know that there's any one individual Nets guy that all of a sudden stands out to me. He's been like, oh, this guy's a crazy good value play. I guess on FanDuel, Aldridge at 5,400 with power forward and center eligibility. Kyrie 94 on FanDuel is somebody who I think is worth getting more exposure to now. So I guess I force myself to some Kyrie now, but I don't have the other day when James Harden was downgraded to questionable. I was really confident he wasn't going to play. I'm really not sure with this game though.
It's tough. Usually the late day downgrade is not a good sign for the availability, right? It's very rarely do you see guys get downgraded and then suit up. Maybe that's just anecdotal and that the numbers don't back that up. I obviously don't have them in front of me, but when a guy just pops up as questionable this late in the day, I tend to believe that he is not going to play.
I usually do too, depending on the injury though. Knee soreness, hamstring injury. This is a hand injury for Harden. This isn't something that I would think to be that lingering or that big of an issue. I think this is a true 50-50 for James Harden. I don't look at it and be like, oh, he has to be out just because this is a late. I have the same thought process as you, though. Generally, somebody's a late downgrade. I think they're not very likely to play. Hand injury is a little different than like knee soreness or Achilles soreness or something, though.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm ramping up my Kyrie from 0 to about 15% just in these last couple of minutes. It means I'm going to have to come down on some other guys that I like, namely Domantas Sabonis. But I do think it's a situation worth building yourself out to take advantage of if it happens.
Yeah, we've got a quick super chat we'll answer here, by the way. Vincent Jefferson saying it's traded. No, James Harden is not getting traded. And Adi Yogi saying he's not playing, let it go. Hey, I wish we knew he wasn't playing. If we knew he wasn't playing, that would make this a really easy situation to break down. I really don't know. I think it's 50-50. Ty G, Devontae Graham or Gary Trent Jr., last man, DK single entry. Devontae Graham, especially with Fred VanVleet in.
Yes.
It would be different if there was no Fred VanVleet, but he is in there. So I prefer Devontae Graham. Getting back to the center position, and we could just wrap this up with a few minutes left. If you have the space to pay up for him, Joel Embiid is just a monster in terms of scoring the basketball right now. If you have the ability to spend up for Joel Embiid, spend up for Joel Embiid today. 11,700. Don't even care what the price point is. I think he's the most upside of anybody on today's slate. Who are the other centers that we have not yet talked about that you're looking to get to today?
It's a small list. Again, when you have so much attention focused on one guy in Hernangomez, it just doesn't leave a lot of room for other players. I do think that Bam Adebayo is too cheap at 7,300, but citing some of the same concerns that I had when talking about Butler, it's just the matchup isn't great. And it's just the opportunity cost of being able to play a guy like Hernangomez. So I have still just a sprinkling of Adebayo, but for the most part, it's a lot of Willie. It's a good handful of Rashawn Holmes, and then just a smattering of some of these other dudes.
Yeah, Hernangomez, relative to the fields, are you overweight, underweight, or about the same?
Over.
Yeah, so am I. And I get he's really crazy popular. Refresh the ownership projections to see where he's at. But I think he's the best points per dollar play on the slate. Differentiating elsewhere, he's projected for 60% ownership now on DK, 76 on FanDuel. The other thing also with him being that popular on FanDuel, he's power forward and center eligibility. If he was only center eligible with that much ownership, be like, okay, he'll look elsewhere. Hard to get away from when he also has power forward eligibility. Short of him getting into foul trouble, he's going to play big minutes, and he's always a good points per fantasy producer when he's on the court. Let's see. About a minute left to go here. Matt, I'm going to ask you, just for tilting purposes, because we're about to watch some of these games and freak out, overreact, who is most likely to ruin your night tonight, either because you played too much for him or didn't play enough?
It's 100% Joel Embiid. I ended up kind of having him get lost in the shuffle at 11,700 at a position that there are a few guys I really like. I don't have nearly enough of him, and it's a smash spot against the Kings. They're the second worst team in the league in terms of defensive efficiency. They allow the most points in the paint per game. If Embiid comes out and has the 70-point game, I think that it will be tough for me to cash, but I just kind of ended up getting focused on a little bit more of a mid-range build, especially when you factor in that I now have a nice handful of Kyrie Irving.
Well, we've got a super chat from Mark Cathell who's saying, Greg, my boy, put on the shades, my dude. I didn't have a real strong low-owned GPP play to put the shades on. You can't overutilize a bit because or else you run it into the ground. You can only use it for special occasions. And I got to do the mask bit because Harden was questionable. So, I got one Zoom filter in there. For me, Jimmy Butler leaving in the first quarter with an injury and not coming back. I'm going to say that's what's most likely to ruin my night. And also what would blow up my Twitter mention. So that would be the guy that most likely ruins my night. Jimmy Butler heading to the locker room early. Don't do it. Remain strong today, Jimmy Butler. No locker room visits for any purpose. Not even at halftime. Halftime, you have to stay on the court, sit at center court, get ready for the second half. No injuries. All right. We're at lock. I hope everybody got their lineups in, but don't go anywhere. Stick around. Matt and I are going to be here for the next 30 minutes. We're talking about the best props on the slate. We're going to be sweating the games. We're going to be tilting. Also, any kind of lineup news that comes out. Maybe Harden gets ruled out in the next 30 minutes. We'll be reacting to that. Anything that happens, Matt and I will be talking about from a DraftKings and a FanDuel standpoint, but as well as talking about our sponsor, Prize Picks. You guys could sign up at right now using the promo code Awesemo and get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit, and you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, Matt, can you pull up Odd Shopper? And I'm going to head on over to Prize. Yeah, go ahead. I'm logging into Prize Picks right now. You go to Odd Shopper. We'll try to find some of the best props on the slate to talk about. And I'm also going to put on a basketball game on my second screen. What should I put? Probably the Pelicans game. That's going to be the one that's going to be most important for this slate.
It's not the one that I care the most about, but yes, I agree.
Well, even if you don't have a ton of exposure there, though, which, I mean, you still do to Hernan Gomez, but
yeah,
it's still the guys you're underweight to. That's going to be pretty massively impactful.
Yes. I was saying more again, my big stand tonight is Doma. So I'll be sweating Doma while you watch the other game. I
could put that on too. We've got because the game. So here's how I'll do it. Whichever one starts first. Neither one of them are going to start on time because this is the way of the NBA. We've got Boston, Pelican. We got Celtics, Pelicans, Mavericks, Pacers, and whichever one comes on first is going to go on my second screen.
Love it.
All right. Do you have Odd Shopper pulled up?
I do.
All right. So read me through Odd Shopper, and I'll compare these numbers to Prize Picks. What are some of the most favorable looking prop plays over on Odd Shopper? If you guys aren't familiar with Odd Shopper, which I'm sure most of you are at this point, it's a free site that we have over a free tool that we have over at Awesemo.com. You can go to Odd Shopper. You could also go to Awesemo.com. You can click on the top right of the page. You'll see that says Odd Shopper. Click on that and you'll find all of the best lines for the legal sports books in your state. Really, really valuable tool to use when you're looking to place prop bets. What are some of the best looking prop bets in our model for tonight?
So we have this Desmond Bane 3-pointers as an incredibly profitable wager. And I like this one a lot. I'm not sure if it's going to be listed on Odd Shopper, but you can get it at plus odds over 2.5 3-pointers. And I wrote this one up for a same game parlay piece that I do for Awesemo. But Bane has hit at least 3 threes in 27 of 47 games this season. He averages 2.9 made 3-pointers per game. He's a pretty good efficiency guy, and he gives us decent volume. So I really like the Bane over tonight. It does look like, unfortunately, that's not an option for us at Prize Picks, but something for y'all to keep in mind at better than even money. I think that's pretty tasty.
My back is against the wall. We've got a super chat, not from Eric Lindquist. It says Eric Lindquist, but it's actually from Duke Lindquist. If you guys have not seen Eric's puppy.
What a cute little guy. My sister has a Burmese mountain dog, which is what I believe that is. And they're so cute and little and tiny and fluffy when they're puppies, and then they grow into these just behemoths. So,
and for people who also aren't aware, I am Duke Lindquist's godfather. So if he's leaving me a super chat and asking me to put on glasses, we're going to put on different glasses for Duke Lindquist, my godson. Welcome to the Lindquist family. And guys, follow at Eric Lindquist on Twitter. Check out his new dog who absolutely rules. And I don't know how to explain it, but I've never seen a dog that's more fitting to be Eric Lindquist's child because the expression looks like Eric Lindquist. It's a dog that seems like it has the personality of Eric. So it seems like a perfect fit. I'm very excited for Duke Lindquist to be making some appearances on shows, and I had to put on the glasses for him. A little bit different ones than normal, but I hope Duke enjoys those. All right, what else is showing up on Prize Picks? By the way, also I love Desmond Bane over 2.5 threes. I haven't projected to make over 3 threes today.
How do you feel about? Let's see. Let's stick with the Odd Shopper here. How about Bam under 4.5 assists? We have that grading out with a 69%, very nice expected win rate, 29% expected return on investment. We're projecting him for 3.7 assists. So the under on 4.5 seems pretty good. And once again, that's a prop that is not available.
Yeah. So good news and bad news. Like you said, the bad news is that that is not up on Prize Picks right now. The good news, I also have Bam Adebayo projected for under 4.5 assists. So I think the under 4.5 is not a bad play to look at. Now we just got an update. James Harden, a game time decision for tonight's game. Like I was saying before, game time decision.
Doesn't change anything.
Doesn't change anything. What does it mean? It means James Harden was questionable before. He's still questionable. It just means we're not going to find out whether he's playing or not until closer to the game, which is a massive headache when that game is the last game that starts on the slate.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I'm proceeding as though he's not going to play. Perhaps that's wrong. Perhaps that's an unfair assumption. But I think they know, right? They have Kyrie tonight. This would be a good spot to rest him. So James Harden's going to have to do a ton of work for this Nets team down the stretch, depending on how long Kevin Durant is sidelined. You only have Irving available for roughly half the games. So if he's not at full strength, I think this is a good spot to kind of get him a little bit of a breather. And with that in mind, I don't mind taking the over on some of these Kyrie props now if you have a little gamble in you. If you have a little bit of that, you want to try and beat the line type of deal, this is a spot where you can potentially beat the line pretty heavily if Harden ends up sitting.
Let's see. There are Kyrie Irving props up right now at Prize Picks. So let's talk about some of these. And we could go through what we think could happen if James Harden is out. And then I'm kind of curious too, because I haven't really looked at Kyrie Irving's individual projections today. To be honest, Kyrie Irving's over-under is 24.5 points on Prize Picks. I have him projected for about 26 today. So I already have a slight lean towards the over, not enough to where I would be looking to make a play on the over 24.5. But then you also introduced the fact that James Harden is questionable. I like that. Give me the over 24.5 points for Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, and just running some quick on-off stuff here, but Irving, unsurprisingly, he's only played 34 minutes with no Harden and no Durant this season, but the usage rate gets up to 32.3%. The assist rate gets up to 25%. I think those numbers would go even higher if he was playing a full game without both players. So yeah, I'd feel honestly, if you wanted to build a full card on James Harden props, or I'm sorry, on Kyrie Irving overs, and just play for that scenario where you're going to get no James Harden, I think that could be plus EV.
Yeah, same. If you have a sports book that does same game parlays, which would become, fairly popular as of late. I will say be careful to see what kind of juice you're getting on some of those same game parlays. The odds are terrible on some of them. But if you get something that's truly correlated, like if we're assuming, hey, James Harden doesn't play, if you're going to build a prop card and just say like, hey, I'm going to take the over for a bunch of Kyrie Irving props, maybe even I'd say probably over for LaMarcus Aldridge scoring props. Let me see if we have Aldridge stuff over on.
It looks like everything just got pulled.
Oh, okay.
So...
They're reacting to us. They're listening. They hear us talking. They hear us talking about them and pull them all down. But yeah, I would say something like Irving overs, LaMarcus Aldridge scoring overs, all stuff to be pretty reasonable that correlates together well if James Harden doesn't play.
Love it.
All right. Have any of these games started yet? They never do.
They never do. Yeah, I think we've got probably another minute or two. We should get something.
Yeah, I just refreshed because the way League Pass works when you're using the desktop version is if you're just looking at the blank screen, it has all the games it's not starting. So you have to refresh it to get a score, and then you can click on the game to watch it. It's a whole to do. All right, let's try to find some other props that we might like on Prize Picks that are independent of injury news and hopefully, fingers crossed, they're up on the site and don't come down, don't get pulled in the middle of us talking about them.
Okay, let's see. How about your boy Jimmy Butler? Does he have a rebounding prop available?
Please be yes. Oh yeah, he does. And that's a pretty low one.
Okay, 6.5. See, we have an expected win rate of 71% on the under for Butler's rebounding prop, but we have it at 7.5. So we have him projected for 6.3 rebounds. I don't think that's enough to really feel comfortable locking something in there.
Yeah, that's about fair. If you find that 7.5 anywhere, I think that's not a bad one to be under 2. But yeah, that's gonna be a no here. Let's keep digging. We're gonna find something. We'll find something.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Embiid, because that game starts in a half an hour, roughly a half an hour.
Celtics Pelicans tipping off, so I could put that on. Also, we got a super chat here from Bill W. So I'm going to address that real quick. What about Sacramento now that Metu is playing? Does that change anything? Not really. Like, I don't think Metu is going to play significant. If Metu ends up starting, then yeah, I'll have to make changes for that. But with that said, I don't think Metu playing is going to change. He's going to play like 14 minutes or something like that. I don't like Halliburton less. I don't like Rashawn Holmes less. I don't like Barnes less. I think
the guy who probably gets hurt most is Marvin Bagley, who nobody really cares about at this point. So
yeah, but so somebody who's we got this new thing now where people could watch if they're watching on Twitch. If you guys post comments, we now see your comments. So I think that's something that we should be pointing out as well, that if you guys are watching on Twitch and want us to see your comments, we can. And we just got one where he said, how have you guys not figured out that games start 10 minutes after the posted time for betting purposes? We're very aware that the games don't start on time. It's also not for betting purposes. It's because the NBA is disorganized. There's no grand scheme that they have to start games late for betting. They just don't start. Sometimes they start on time. Most of the times they don't. It's not because of betting though.
It is always interesting. Maybe that's why they do it, Greg. They want people to be able to gamble with their friends, like which game will tip off first on the 7 p.m. slate.
Yeah,
I'll give you 3-1 on the Pacers tipping first tonight. Maybe
it's already tipped off. We're a minute in. 3-2. Celtics up on the Pelicans. Now I've got this. Here's the real tilt is when I'm trying to pull the game up on League Pass on my other screen here, is knowing that I have to click the mute button immediately so the audio doesn't start coming through when we're in the middle of the show. I did it effectively there, but looks like what just happened? Robert Williams got no. It was just out of bounds off of Robert Williams. I thought they were calling a foul on Josh Hart. CG leaving us a super chat. Sites push back the start times when we want to fill a big tourney, though. Yes, if the games also get pushed back, but like there's not going to be a time when the games have already started that the sites also push it back. This guy Zeus following up. How is this not common? Because it's not what they do. They don't start the games late because of betting purposes. That's not why they do it. They just don't start games on time because they suck at starting games on time. And they try to boost the ratings for their dumb pregame shows that nobody should care about. I kind of find them entertaining. All right, let's go back to Prize Picks, Matt. We're gonna find a prop. We're gonna find a prop on Prize Picks for the people. It might take us a while, but we're gonna find one here. We're gonna keep digging. We're doing our homework.
I was kind of gonna ask, like, how do you feel about any of the Embiid props in a potential smash spot versus the Kings? Like, is this a spot where we should be going right back to Embiid getting over 31.5 points? I'm not assuming that that's going to grade out very well in Odd Shopper, but that's going to rely on like long-term means. And, I think sometimes if you want to take an over on a scoring prop like that, you have to do it on your own. You know what I'm saying? And,
yeah. So
I don't hate Embiid's over tonight.
There was a really good window to bet Embiid overs. He went on a stretch where he hit the over on his points prop in 15 of 16 games. Here's the issue, though. The prop is significantly high now. We're not looking at it. It's just appropriate now. I've been tweeting about this for a while, that books were not pricing Joel Embiid properly. And his usage rate, just for the longest time, and still now with players out for the Philadelphia 76ers, we should be expecting Joel Embiid to normally have a usage rate north of 40%. But sorry, I misspoke on something. Seth Curry coming back. Shake Milton's still out. Seth Curry comes back. It's a slight hit to Joel Embiid's usage. It's still going to be high, but I do think that when the scoring prop is so high on him at 31.5, there's just less wiggle room with Seth Curry back in the mix. And there was that stretch where he hit his over on 15 of 16 games, the over for his points prop. But a lot of those games, the scoring prop is 27.5 points, 28, 26.5. It's just gone to an appropriate price point now, in my opinion.
All right. I think that's fair. I still think Embiid goes over tonight.
I wouldn't mind it. I have a chunk of him in DFS today. I'm going to be overweight to Embiid in DFS. If he wants to go out and score 40 real life points, I'm cool with it, but I'm not going to be betting his points prop. One thing that is kind of interesting, though, to your point, is if you ever do want to compare some of the numbers at Prize Picks to just other sports books from kind of like the entire concept of Odd Shopper, shopping odds and trying to find what other places are, most sports books do have Joel Embiid at 33.5 points as over under, 31.5 at Prize Picks. So if you are interested in taking the over on Joel Embiid's points prop, makes a lot more sense at Prize Picks than some other places. Let's dig back in. Dig back in. We're going to find one.
I think I found one we can use, Greg. Jason Tatum, the line for his rebounding prop, 6.5. Hopefully it's 6.5 on Odd Shopper. Oh no, that game started. Why is it still showing me this prop?
For which player?
For Tatum. The game already started.
Oh, well, maybe there's a really good lean on what's going to happen with his final points then. If I could bet stuff halfway through the game, I mean, we're only 2 minutes in, but if I could bet stuff 2 minutes into the game, I'd have a really good feel for some of this stuff.
It'd be nice.
Let's see, what kind of a start is he off to? Look for a prop. I'm gonna read off some box scores and we can tilt a little bit here.
Okay.
Jason Tatum has 5 points in the first 2 minutes. Should have been on overs there. Robert Williams, I know some people were asking about Time Lord. 2 points, an assist, and a block for him. So pretty solid start there. He also does have a personal foul. From the Pelicans side of the game, the only bucket has been scored by Willy Hernan-Gomez. He has 2 points. Nobody else on the team has registered a single stat to this point. Not a rebound, not an assist, not a steal, not a personal foul, nothing. Only Willy Hernan-Gomez has stats to this point. Pulling up the Mavericks side of the game. Oh, Garrett Temple just hit a shot, so that can't be said anymore. The other game being played, Mavericks and Pacers. Matt LaMarca, his GPV play of the game, you should have put the shades on for this one, was Domantas Sabonis. In 3 minutes, Sabonis has 6 points and a rebound. Matt LaMarca's favorite tournament play of the day. Looks like it's off to a good start. On the Mavs side of the game, Kristaps Porzingis, 4 points and a rebound in the first 3.5 minutes. Luka Doncic, 5 points and an assist. So big games from the pay-up options there. Sabonis, Porzingis, Doncic, all off to a really good first 3 minutes, which, as you know, is the most important time of any NBA DFS contest, is the first 3 minutes of the first game.
Everyone knows this.
But also, somebody, William Westry, asked, where did Time Lord come from? When he was first drafted by the Celtics, one of the reasons that Robert Williams dropped in the draft was because he was considered to be somebody who had attitude issues, and people weren't sure what his actual commitment was to basketball. And there was an issue where he slept through multiple practices for the Celtics as a rookie. Usually a no-no. A lot of players don't do that. But anyway, the Celtics ended up buying him a watch, and he became known as Time Lord. That's the nickname, Time Lord, Robert Williams, because he kept sleeping through practices. And then I think what ended up,
by the way.
What's that?
I respect that.
I think what ended up happening was he ended up getting, it was something like 8 clocks for his apartment and put them all around his room. So they would go off and then he'd have to get up and walk all around the room to turn them off. I think something like that might have happened, or there was like a cartoon. One of the two.
I haven't slept through a show yet for Awesemo, but I have done it for other sites. So it might happen eventually. You know, sometimes I set an alarm and I just sleep through it. I'm like a big grizzly bear and I need to hibernate.
Yeah, that's why. But people also don't know about Matt. Some people know. If you were here last week, you know. Also, world championship volleyball player, sleeper, volleyball champion, all that. And also
very important.
Yeah. Oh my God, Celtics up 16-4 now on this pathetic Pelicans team. No.
By the way, I found one. I found a good one, and it's
all right. Hit me with it.
It's on Prize Picks. We're going to make some money with this one. Duncan Robinson, under 12.5 points. We have him projected for 10.1. Very tasty.
Let's see. Well, where do I have Duncan Robinson? Yeah, I've got Duncan Robinson at 10.6 points. I dig it. Give me the under. It took us 20 minutes to get there, but we found something we like on Prize Picks. We're on the board. We've got one we like. We've got some perspective ones if Harden gets ruled out. Somebody in chat saying that Harden is playing. No, he's questionable. Do not spread misinformation. Oh, he's only asking a question. Okay. My bad. I thought he was telling people Harden's playing. He's asking if Harden's playing. No, he's questionable. We don't know yet. Maybe, maybe not. It's the way of the injury reports. I wish I had a good read on Harden. Usually, like I said before, I would think players sit in this situation. I really don't know for Harden. And does it influence you at all that it's a primetime game? I'm pretty sure tonight's game is on ABC.
I don't think that the teams care about that. So I don't think that I don't think it matters. I know that the NBA had talked about, being more harsh on teams that rest guys during primetime games, but these teams get around it because they don't say that they're resting. They say that they're dealing with some sort of injury. Like if Harden doesn't want to play tonight, they'll just say, oh, he's got this going on, and it just won't be a big deal.
Yeah, I think that's I think something else to consider here too. The Nets are probably not winning this game, which I think is a funny thing to say because every time we've seen teams in these spots rest players against a better team, they keep winning recently. The Pacers did this against the Warriors, end up beating them with none of their guys playing. Realistically, though, the Nets are not winning this game, and that's something probably even if Harden plays, maybe it's something else that impacts their judgment here. But yeah, James Harden, I haven't seen any updates on him. Also, we do have a note here from Steve Nash. It says the hamstring tightness is past him, but the hand strain has been bothering him for a few days. It flared up a little bit while he was lifting. James Harden. I mean, he must mean lifting a stripper. He wasn't lifting weights, was he?
Lifting a cheeseburger, maybe.
Yeah, James Harden,
fat guy.
Yeah, James Harden. He's not lifting weights. It was just something else that he's lifting. But he underwent an MRI that came back clean. We'll see. He's going to warm up. If he feels good, he's going to play. If he doesn't feel good, he's not going to play.
I think the takeaway is that Harden is healthy enough to play basketball tonight. It's just whether or not the team is going to give him the night off. And unfortunately, we won't know that until it is announced, right? There's really no reason to speculate any further than that.
We've got somebody asked us in chat here, who's softer, Fat Harden? Oh, that was Mike. It was producer Mike. Awesome. Yeah. Who's fatter? Who's softer, Fat Harden or Jimmy Butler? Different. Like physically, Harden is softer. Mentally, Jimmy Butler.
Can I just say that James Harden,
yeah, go ahead.
Just not good genes, right? There are sometimes you see him and you're like, wow, this guy is 30 pounds overweight. And then you see him the next day and it's like, oh, never mind. It's not so bad. Like it's just certain lights, certain uniforms just make him look a lot worse than I think it really is.
So here's something else also. He wears one of those, I forget what they call it. He wears one of those rib protectors a lot when he plays.
Okay.
It's not a flattering look under an NBA jersey.
Right. To the point where there were people that literally thought he was playing basketball in a fat suit with the Rockets 2 years ago before they traded him. Like that was a real conspiracy theory, was that Harden was using a fat suit.
So what it really was I think he had like a rib injury at one point, and there was a couple of things. Number one, he had an injury that he was wearing some sort of protective gear underneath his shirt for. The other thing also is that there was a lot of photoshopped images of him online. And once you Photoshop something and gets circulated a bunch of times, it just becomes fact to a lot of people, and then it becomes the point of no return. All right, let's try to find a couple more. At the very minimum, let's give people one more prop on Prize Picks we can find. We like the Duncan Robinson under. That one, thumbs up. That was a good one. What else can we find here, Matt?
What else can we find? What do you have Pascal Siakam projected for with Fred VanVleet in the lineup?
Pascal Siakam for points, rebounds, assists?
Points.
A little over 20.
Okay. That's going to be a pass then.
19 and a half on Prize Picks. That's a no-go for me. One thing that's hard with some of these Toronto guys is trying to figure out how many minutes they're going to play, because Nick Nurse had said that he wants to cut down on these guys' minutes because he's been logging a bunch of minutes and he wants to extend the rotation to 9-10 games. But then he plays Pascal Siakam. I know the game went to overtime, but 43 and a half minutes last game. And the game before that, which was a blowout, he played 39 and a half minutes, and he probably would have played well over 40 in that game. So we got this liar of a coach who most coaches, dirty, filthy liars. I said this before. He was like, I want to cut back on Pascal Siakam's playing time. Siakam's played less than 40 minutes once since January 11th, and it was a game that was a blow, and he played 39 and a half minutes.
Love it.
It's hard for me to take unders on somebody when I think they're probably going to play over 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's fair. That's straight out of the Tibbs rule book right there. Here's one that I enjoy. I think you were a little bit higher on this guy than I was, but Kyle Kuzma under 16 and a half points. We have that one with a 67% win rate. I like that. I like the under on 16 and a half. It was 17 and a half, I want to say, earlier today, but I still think it's got some merit at 16 and a half.
By the way, this Celtics Pelicans game is absolutely brutal to watch. 24-8. The Pelicans put up 8 points. There's 3 minutes left in the first quarter. This game's a disaster and not remotely fun to watch. This game is going to be, there's going to be garbage time galore. I have a feeling Jackson Hayes can end up having a pretty good game as a pivot option off of Willy Hernan-Gomez at the rate this game is going.
No, come on, Willie.
This game, it's not pretty. I like the under for Kyle Kuzma as well. Really difficult matchup for him against the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies defense has been really, really good this year. Even with Dylan Brooks out, nothing that's too much of a concern. And then we also have what we talked about before. Bradley Beal's back for the Washington Wizards. That really reduces the amount of shot attempts, touches that Kyle Kuzma gets. I don't have him crazy below that number, but I have him a little over 15 points, which is below that 16 and a half number. I could get behind it. Under 16 and a half points for Kyle Kuzma, who appears to have a shaved head in his prize picks picture. I don't remember Kyle Kuzma with a shaved head.
Yeah, I don't remember either, per se. I had one more and now I lost it. I was really working hard trying to find these guys.
Yeah, let's see. Let's do a fantasy points one, and we could close out with that.
Oh, those are always fun.
Close out with a fantasy point total. Oh, I got one for sure. I like Jimmy Butler over 42 fantasy points all day, all night. Jimmy Butler over 42. I've got Jimmy Butler for. Yeah, I've got Jimmy Butler for 47. Give me 40 over 42 for Jimmy buckets.
I'll take Tyrese Halliburton over 34 as well. Again, I think your biggest problem with Halliburton was that his price had gotten up to like 7,900 on DraftKings, but I think 34 is a pretty modest score for him.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were talking about it before, I said I had Halliburton for around 39 fantasy points. It was just where the price was at. It was just a little fair to maybe a couple $100 too cheap. 34 fantasy points on prize picks. Give me the over on that as well. I think that's something to certainly look at. By the way, also something else I should add, prize picks. They now have blocks and steals as props. Also over on Awesemo, we now have 3-pointers and defensive stats. We have ROIs and projected win rates on props for defensive stats and for threes. More stuff you guys should be looking at when you check out OddsShopper. One other thing also, if you're signing up at Prize Picks for the first time, use the promo code Awesemo, get to a $100 bonus on your first deposit, and that'll also get you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring the show. That is going to bring us to the end of the Saturday Night Live Before Lock. Any final words for the people, Matt?
Yeah, apologies for not being higher on Luka Doncic.
That is not a bad way to close. Luka, currently 3 minutes left in the first quarter, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Luka going nuts. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel on the way out. Have a great end of the weekend. Watch all our football content tomorrow.